Welcome to NWO Voices. I'm your host, Jack Dawson. Today we are bringing you the June 14th Committee of the Whole meeting from downtown Kenora. Today's meeting covers many topics, including the plans for a new Junior A hockey team called the Kenora Islanders, a word from the Northwest Business Center, a risk table presentation, as well as representatives from Customer Service Department on how to structure complaints. Council also listens to an in-depth communications audit presented by the Hub at Sutherland.
Okay, good morning everybody. Let's call this meeting to order, the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. Item number A, public information notices. As required under Notice Bylaw 160, 2022, the public is advised of Council's intention to adopt the following at its June 21st, 23 meeting. Budget amendment in the amount of up to $120,000 plus taxes to be funded through the Future Land Development Reserve to fund an access road on 9th Street North. Is it on 9th Street or is it?
Brinkman.
Pardon?
Brinkman.
Pardon?
Brinkman.
So
Yeah.
relocate from 9th to Brinkman.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll need to make that change then. Adopt a development contribution bylaw which will enable the municipality to enter into agreements for private sector projects that can clearly demonstrate public benefit in the interest of the municipality. Moving on, land acknowledgement. Councillor Koch, and could everybody stand, please?
As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty-Free lands which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with Indigenous people. We give thanks for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. We seek wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Let these principles guide us in our decision-making.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, item number B, declaration of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. For any councillor on today's agenda or from a meeting at which a member was not in attendance, seeing none. Item number C, so that'll be confirmation of previous committee minutes, resolution number 1.
Move resolution number 1, your worship, that the minutes from, it's seconded by Councillor Manson, that the minutes from the last regular committee of the whole meeting held May 10th, 2023, and special committee of the whole meetings held May 25th, 2023 be confirmed as written and filed.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number D, so we have several deputations this morning. First up is it has your name, Jack, but I know that Tim is going to speak. So the Kenora Islanders Junior A Hockey Club. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for the time today. We appreciate the opportunity to address a few key points and provide some clarification on recent events surrounding the establishment of junior hockey. For people that don't know me, I'm Tim Gosnell. I'm the president of the Junior A team, the Kenora Islanders, and I've been in minor hockey in Kenora for many, many years. Obviously, the first place to determine whether junior team is viable is ice time, and that's where it started with Stace Gander and Josh Nelson quite some time ago, and it was recommended by them to hold off and wait for the new Andrew Smith to come in, which was done, and the first meeting with that was January 19th. That meeting was done here with Jack Dawson. I wasn't a part of that meeting. We did do multiple other meetings after that. So the business plan and the ice usage plan with Stace and Josh was also given to Andrew Smith with encouragement, thinking that we would be able to get ice time that would be doable. So we moved forward. Jumping a little ahead, we had a meeting with the user groups, Kyle, the CEO, with Andrew, Casey Pica, And I thought that meeting was very encouraging. It went very well. We thought we were definitely going in the right path. Then all the user groups were in agreement that we needed a mock schedule. Once we got a mock schedule, which would come from the city, to say that, you know, it's doable or not doable. Once that meeting was over, and again, that meeting went very well. I was, you know, thinking happy thoughts after that meeting that we were definitely moving forward. 2 days after that, we got a press release that the city is not giving us ice time. With no warning to us, we were shocked, to say the least, that press release was put up. So we did meet with Kyle again, and with Andrew, and with Darren Nicholas, the commissioner of the SIJHL, to kind of get what was going on. We did take out of that meeting that we were going to create another mock schedule, and carry that process on to see if this is something that's doable. That didn't happen. It did go into that all of a sudden now there's a review happening of the ice allocation policy, which again kind of was a little bit of a surprise. I knew that it was coming. Didn't think it was coming at that point. I thought we would have had some more time to figure out our ice allocation if we could make anything work. So that after that meeting, we expected that we would see the mock schedule again. We communicated multiple times with Kyle and Andrew, asking if this was something that was going to come out. It was kind of delayed and kind of felt to us that it was being pushed to the back burner, and kind of thinking that it would just go away on its own. We didn't go away. We had multiple other arenas ask us to play in their arenas, Shoal Lake, Whitefish Bay, and then we ended up making a sitting with Vermilion Bay and kind of giving them a commitment to do some games there, because we did say right from the very beginning that we would be doing puck drop in 23. We were very hopeful that it would be in one of the Kenora arenas. That's not happening right now. So our process of starting to, you know, book ice, ultimately we want to have our games in Kenora, and coming with our games also comes with practices, which is day ice. So that's ice that's not currently being used. So that would, in our opinion, help the city out in costing for ice. Bringing the games into Kenora is a great opportunity for the city. Restaurants, hotels, the arena itself, I think is a wonderful opportunity. With the amount of players that come in per team, just even if it's a day game, thinking of, you know, you're going to have 25 people eating in a restaurant, just that alone is bringing income in. And the ice time for the arenas for practice would be during the day, and that's, you know, an hour and a half a day, 4 days a week. So that's a significant amount of ice. On the 22nd of April, we did get approval from Hockey Northwestern Ontario, so we are fully sanctioned. As of right now, again, we're looking at Vermilion Bay in hopes that Kenora would give us some enough ice to have a minimum of half of our games. The SIJHL knocked those numbers down this year at their general meeting, so that wouldn't be as many games. We're hoping for 10 to 15 in Kenora, which would come with practices as well. With the U18s, we know we've been said multiple times that there is concern with the U18 team, the AAAs. We are here to work with all of minor hockey, including AAA, all AA programs, as a feed program to our junior program. So we have met with them multiple times, with the Thistles Council, with coaches. So we would be working with them to make their program successful as well, and not to try and take away from any any other hockey program in Kenora. So that's important to note that, we're wanting to work with them. We're bringing a coach in from out of town that is highly qualified, that it would be willing to work with the coaches, with the kids. So that is another plus for the hockey community. The benefit to the operation within the community, the spin-offs to extend beyond the arena. Our team would be heavily involved in the community. We would, in all different aspects, and not just within hockey. So that's a huge part of it for me, and why I signed up is the passion for it, and knowing that it's something that I think is viable and would be wonderful for Kenora. So, just to say for the hockey itself, the influx with the visiting team, the coaches, we have to bring officials in. To the hotels, the restaurants in off season. Middle of winter, there is no other tournaments going on. The hotels are slow, restaurants are slow. That's going to be a huge spin-off. And we have been in contact with hotels, the restaurants, to kind of chat with them to see their thoughts to it. So that is a big thing for me is the involvement in the community. We would be heavily involved with volunteering on and off the ice. So that's very important. The only other point that I want to say is, the passion for hockey. This is the third try for the juniors in Kenora, and I think this is something that is doable and viable. With our conversations with multiple people in the city, we do think that the schedule is doable, that we can make it work. Will there be some sacrifices? Yeah, there might be. But I think the user groups are willing to take those sacrifices and knowing what's coming with it. So that's all I have. Some questions?
Yes. Councillor Van Dyne.
Thank you. Thank you for that. As I think maybe you're aware, at this table, our part piece of this is just the ice allocation policy, which I think is still a review and hasn't been presented to us at this time. My question is around the user groups impacted. I know you sort of spoke to the AAA, the AA teams, but I think that something that we also have to keep in mind is the Recreation Center is a taxpayer-funded entity, and that it has to service our whole community, and that we have to make sure it's an equitable space for all groups, regardless of whether they're the most profitable piece of the puzzle. So something when we're looking at this ice allocation policy that I want to be clear that is a priority for me is that our youth groups and our women's groups are not the ones who are bearing the brunt of the impacts of this. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the conversation, this is a question around like the hotel piece. What is their conversation been as far as viability for having rooms and that kind of space? Because we all know we do have a crunch for hotel spaces based on availability right now.
Well, with thinking, of course, that the Clarion is going to open back up, but in my conversations with a few of the hotel owners that I know personally is during those off-peak times, there is rooms available. It's, if there's a minor hockey tournament, that wouldn't be a weekend that we would be looking to book rooms. We would do day games if that was the case. So there is room for movement within the SI to move the games around to make sure that we're coming in on those off times. So we're not coming in at a hockey tournament weekend, because then it wouldn't be viable with hotels. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Koch.
Thank you for all that. I'm just wondering what does the SIJHL require of a team or a space within our rec center to host a team?
Like, what do you mean for requirements of
Like-
space? Like change rooms?
Yeah.
Ideally, it would be ideal that we had our own change room. We know going into the Kenora Arena at this stage that that's not going to happen. And we're willing to work with what we have for now, and then to look in the long term would be to have our own change room in some capacity, for sure.
Sorry, Councillor Bernie.
Thanks for that presentation, Tim. And just a couple questions. Just to get a chronology here for myself, you mentioned January 19th was your first meeting with, who was that with?
Stace Gander and Josh Nelson.
Okay, and then you mentioned a subsequent
It was
meeting.
November.
November.
Andrew was the 19th.
Oh, and the 19th, yes, sorry, it was Andrew Smith.
Okay, when was the meeting before that? Prior, you said November?
November.
And then you mentioned a subsequent meeting with user groups. You said that went well. When was the date of that?
11th of April.
Of April?
That was in April, and I just want to be clear, Councillor Bernie, that not all user groups were present at that meeting.
Okay. Okay. All right. And you also mentioned about the possibility of 10 to 15 games in Kenora and practices as well. What, given that number, what type of revenue would that, what would the cost be involved?
For ice time?
Yeah, what would you pay the city for those 10 to 15 games?
That would be a
and
question
practices?
for Andrew Smith to answer on. I don't know what the ice rates are for this year, so.
I'm just trying to get an idea what type of revenue we're looking at from.
Current
those
ice
two.
rates are $119 an hour.
So what's a ballpark for,
Practice
how many
3 hours.
practices would you be looking at, like
4 a week.
for a week?
Yep.
Okay.
That's 6 hours.
I'd like to, we can have another conversation about that after. I just wanted to say, and we talk about hotels, accommodations, that kind of thing. We can paralyze the process by too much analysis. Cities find a way, communities find a way. I've been involved in hockey for my whole life with my son, and tournaments happen. Fort Francis hosted the Dudley Hewitt Cup. I believe Sioux Lookout has as well, or your fault, or Red Lake. And they make it work. And it really is a boon to the community. I've gone to these places where you may not be able to stay in the town, but you stay in an adjacent area. So I don't think that modeling is 100% accurate. I think that sort of saying you build it and they will come. And I really that sounds flippant, but there's actually a large grain of truth to that. So Councillor Ben Bellingham's points are well taken, but I think this is a great business opportunity, and we need to have vision here and look boldly to the future. I know I look back at people like Bob Nault, some people in Kenora, Mike Richards, who've played hockey here in Kenora, Bantam, but when there was a junior team, you look at the connections and the deep-rooted connections that have developed because of the game here in Kenora. And it's not just about hockey. I mean, any sport can foster those relationships. But I think this is a really great opportunity. As you said, this is the third crack at it. I really hope that it can succeed, and I certainly support it. So I don't think we can, we can be mired in, it's not going to, we have to make a decision. It's not going to be 100% perfect. But I really think that the details will work themselves out. They always have, from what I've seen. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions of council? No? Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
We'll take that information away. So we're going to make a little shift in the order of deputations, and that we're going to have the risk table presentation next, if that's okay.
Good morning, everyone.
The floor is yours.
If everyone doesn't know who I am, I'm Jim Neal. So I'm one of the staff sergeants here at the Kenora BP Detachment, and I'm also the co-chair for the Kenora Situation Table called RISK. I'm here joined by my co-chair, Sarah Diaz.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Diaz, the CEO of CMHA Kenora, and our frontline staff actually facilitate the table with the OPP, and I sit at the steering committee level with Jim as the co-chair.
Succeeded first, I got the slide. So if you don't mind with this, I don't want to do PowerPoint to death here, but I think it'll help to give us some background and go through everything so we get a clear understanding. I'm not sure of everyone's understanding of what's been transpiring with the situation table. It's been in Kenora since May 10th, 2016. So originally 8 individual groups like police, justice, social services, Kenora were identified as a new way to have an initiative to help have a safer and healthier community. So the founding partners, as you can see on the screen, were Ontario Provincial Police, CMHAK, Lake of the Woods District Hospital, Youth Justice Ministry of Children and Youth Services, Avenue G Family Services, Firefly, Kenora Rainy River Child and Family Services, and Changes Recovered Home.
I think at this point as well, we also want to give some credit here to Councillor Bernie, who was actually sort of the leading force on the development of the risk table in Kenora. And we sat at many tables in having those discussions on how that implementation was going to play out for Kenora, so thank you.
And in May 2016, we were one of the first tables in Canada to start. So if we go to the next slide. There are 9 guiding principles, and I think it's important that we go through these a little bit slower so that you understand the process, because this is a very process-orientated table. So, 9 guiding principles: develop protocols to enable or enhance effective information sharing across disciplines and agencies. Obviously, number 1 is very important because that's something that we strive for even today. Develop and operate a risk table for Kenora to address situations deemed to be at acutely elevated risk through rapid multi-agency interventions and service connections. You'll hear a lot today about this presentation about acutely elevated risk. Ensure confidentiality is maintained and reinforced throughout the risk table process as governed by the Ontario's Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Also the Ontario's Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And, of course, Personal Health Information Protection Act as they apply in each case. So there is a set of standard rules you'll see in 2 slides where we deal with all these situations regarding privacy. We gather and develop a database for shared interdisciplinary research related to social services, health, policing, education, to develop an inventory of local needs and gaps and identify opportunities for enhancement in programming, supports needed for wellness and social determinants of health. That's a big one we're going to talk about again in the presentation that Sarah's going to really point out. Develop a robust measurement system support collective individual accountabilities, reporting requirements of participating members and agencies. That's again working on our community partners and how we work together to have better collaboration and accountability. Contribute to learn from and share with parallel initiatives in collaborative, risk-driven community safety, well-being occurring across jurisdictions. Of course, this ties into our community safety and well-being plan. Identify systemic issues and trends, which you'll see shortly how that is pulled out from the data. Risk factors and vulnerable population in order to make recommendations for effective interventions and prevention strategies. Of course, we strive to have the risk table and the community plan for safety and well-being become an integral and sustainable and endorsable part of risk-driven collaborative community safety model in Kenora. Develop and execute a communication strategy designed to engage community and inform the public and other stakeholders of the achievements of risk. So yearly, prior to COVID, we had been doing forums where we had the risk table brought forward all the data. So here's a pamphlet that I think Sarah just passed around. It basically breaks down in a very simple way how the situation table works. So I'll give you a chance to read it. There's 2 major points that I think we really want to focus on. So the first one is acutely elevated risk. So you'll hear that brought up a lot. So when people are brought to the situation table, it's just not random people. It's someone that is an acutely elevated risk, which is a situation where imminent harm is present. Without immediate intervention, these situations would escalate and a negative outcome such as criminalization, victimization, or harm is likely to occur. So they have to meet that threshold of acutely elevated risk, and that's where the table works on. From there, we go into that 4-filter approach, and this is how we talked about earlier about the privacy acts that obviously sometimes we have issues crossing those boundaries when working collaboratively. So the four-filter approach is when an agency decides about and screen out that the person's at acutely elevated risk, and then they're brought to the table with de-identified discussion to assess risk. Everyone at the table has an equal voting ability. They vote whether the person meets acutely elevated risk. Once that's been deemed that they have, a de-identified discussion continues to occur and intervening agencies are chosen. So lead agencies and assisting agencies. And then from there, and the filter 4 part of it is where the agencies that are now dedicated to be involved in that intervention sit and discuss non-de-identified information so they know exactly who they're dealing with, what they're going to do, and the plan they're going to come up with.
And the key around sort of the internal agency screening, and it's in your report package in a bit more detail, is organizations have to really screen internally if they have the capacity in order to deal with those particular complex cases. And if they don't have the capacity, that's where it meets the threshold to be able to refer to the risk table. Because of those privacy guidelines, there are sections under the Personal Health Information Act that need to be met. And if they meet that threshold, then we're able to have those conversations to move that forward.
Councillor Byrne.
So, sir, yeah, I don't want to derail your presentation, but so these referrals can come from any of these partner agencies, like a school, your agency.
Yeah, we're gonna go over a whole
Yeah,
list of
of course.
agencies that we're gonna show who's been contributing on this report for 2000.
When you say capacity, obviously, let's say a school or whatever they have, the capacity is limited to deal
That's,
with
yeah.
these.
And like Jim was saying, you will see a breakdown of sort of who the top originating organizations are that are referring, and then sort of who is the top lead and assisting organizations as well.
So here's a kind of calendar for June of this year. So originally the table had met at the OPP detachment in the boardroom, and then that worked really well for a number of years. It was a little out of the way for everybody to come out there, but it was a good place to meet. COVID hit. We had to go to an online version, which was effective, but not nearly as effective as in person. Fortunately, we've had the opportunity to partner with the Community Justice Center, which is located on Main Street, and we now use that location, sit in a circle, and all the partners meet on Thursdays at 9, every other Thursday at 9, to discuss situation table issues. Okay, agency representation at the table. I am not going to read all these, but as everyone can see, there is quite a variety. Majority of Kenora, at one time or another, has been involved in the table, and there are some main partners that are there definitely every time. The table is always welcome to have people there. We just have certain requirements need to be met. For anyone to join the table, you have to actually take the online course offered by Wilfrid Laurier University. That gives you a certificate that you've completed situation table training, and of course your organization signing on the agreement to come to the table for privacy issues. Okay, so what we got today is the report from 2020 to 2021 that we're going to go over. Sarah has basically created these reports off the side of her desk because we all work off the side of our desk to make sure this happens.
I think one key element here as well is you see the logo, which is on the side there, which is the Human Services and Justice Coordinating Committee. This is something that has been within our community since 1997. It's an interministerial partnership with 7 different ministries at the provincial level, and CMHA is the sponsoring agency for this particular work. We received $7,000 to be able to do this partnership work here in the community. That has not changed since 1997. And with that, there's different levels of membership. There's a committee that sits at the regional portion, which is in Thunder Bay, which I co-chair, as well as the provincial HSJCC table, which looks at larger sort of systemic issues. And we've taken things like bail reform issues, legal aid representation in specialty courts, up to the provincial committee for discussion. So that's an important logo, I think, for this group to also understand and how it's implemented within our community. So we meet 4 times a year currently in order to discuss those larger issues that we need to move forward.
So as I know I've gone pretty quick, but I wanted to give lots of opportunity for questions at some point. what we've discussed is how we have de-identified information that we track at the table. And there is an actual provincial database that is used by all situation tables in the province to track this data. So what we're going to do right now is a report that Sarah has generated to show the data for that year, and that's what Sarah's talking about, how that data can be used through other committees and other projects, and how we direct what we do, whether it's community safety, well-being, or policing challenges, or how we're going to affect change. So in this year, there were 39 referrals brought. 92% were individuals and 8% were families. So just so everyone's clear, a referral can be brought to the table for a person, a family, and even a place. So majority of referrals are individuals, but we do have families that are brought to the table that are in acutely elevated risk, and we discuss how we can have an intervention to help them. Breaking down by gender, in this year there was 59% males, 41% females. And I think it's important to note that the data, so when you bring someone forward, there's a lot of information that's brought out. So it's de-identified what you talked about, the top risk factors. So the person bringing the individual forward will list off all the risk factors, and they're tracked. So you can see the top risk factors during this year, that year that we're talking about. Mental health was the first one, which I think we all in the room understand we have some issues with. Criminal involvement was the second, and then drugs, alcohol, and housing virtually all the same. So top lead agencies. So when we have that filter 3 where you figure out who's going to be the lead agency, these are the lead agencies in this report. There was district hospital, their social work department, and addictions mental health department took a lot of the leads. CMHA Kenora was there as well, along with Kenora Association for Community Living, KIP Family Services, and Avenue Family Services. You can see the overall risk for the cases brought forward was 75%. Obviously, we strive for a lot higher. We strive for 100. But I think it's important to understand that the individuals brought forward that have acutely elevated issues. These are really high, impactful issues, and that always reducing the risk is something that might not happen the first time, but it could take multiple attempts at the table. So the risk, even though it says 75%, there's always a constant mixture of individuals that are, it's really hard to get them to get to below that acutely elevated threshold, no matter how many interventions we do. Did you want to talk about the agencies, Randy, or good?
Yeah, just in regards, just a bit of an understanding. So when you're looking at, then we have a bit more of a breakdown around the risk factors. A sort of understanding sort of how the system works in the sense of funding. There are only a minimal amount of organizations within our community that are able to receive addiction-related funding. And that's criteria that is stipulated with Ontario Health North. And so when you're seeing some of this information, I think some of those questions you need to be asking yourself is who are those organizations and what sort of is the bed capacity in regards to some of that funding?
Councillor Moncrief.
So on the previous slide, you had a total number, I think it was 39, yeah, so 39 referrals. Is that 39 different individuals or is that 39 interventions?
That's 39 times a referral was brought to the table. I can't tell you exactly if the same person wasn't brought maybe in January and then brought again in November, but 39 times referrals were brought to the table.
Because referrals are closed, the evidence-based practice indicates they have to be closed within 48 hours. You're going to see through some of the data that we're going to present to you today, it's taking about 19 days to actually close a referral just because of the engagement and lack of resources in the community to deal with some of those complexities.
It doesn't, sorry, just a supplementary, lack of resources, it seems heavily resourced. It doesn't seem like a lack of resources to me.
Again, I go back to some of the comments that I've just made. I think we need to have an understanding of funding allocation and what is bed capacity in the community and which organizations can apply for that funding allocation that's offered.
Okay, so now we talked about the breakdown by age, and I think this is something important because I know we talk a lot about it with our policing. We talk a lot about with individuals in the community and organizations and how we can deal with where we need to put our resources. And you can see the majority in this year allocation was 18 to 24 was the main group that were brought before the table, with second being 25 to 29. So basically 18 to 29 were the majority of individuals brought forward to the table in acutely elevated risk. So I think that's important to understand that we have that data at our fingertips, and it helps direct us in what we're doing for the community safety stuff, but also how we're deploying our resources. Like when we look at mental health crisis response teams, do we need them at what age category? When we look at who we're going to be dealing with and what we can do, that helps us determine that.
Yeah, Councilor
We don't,
Martin.
oh, sorry, we don't have the comparison report from the previous year, but we will talk a little bit about how there has been a decrease in the 12 to 17 based on some interventions that were put in place that we'll speak to closer to the end.
So in your opinion or your experience, I guess, not opinion, is there a high percentage of that 29.41 that are kids aging out of care?
Yes.
How
Very
high?
much so.
Guess how
Yeah.
high? Like majority?
I can't give you an actual percentage because we're starting to look at that at the steering committee level. That will be coming. We'll be able to break that down in future reports.
Okay.
Yeah, you picked up on right away. We're already working on that gap and trying to figure out what we're going to do. So for the year, there's the top risk factors. Like I said, I already listed off the top 5, but there's some other ones. So there's many risk factors. They're all tracked, and we use the database to show us where we're having issues in the community. So then we can even break it down more. So one of the really important and fascinating parts about the situation table is the risk-driven database. Like the interventions do have an impact on the community for sure, and the partnerships that are built with the organizations is very important. But having the data at our fingertips also helps direct us what we need to look at. So the chart above indicates the top risk factors for males aged 18 to 24. So we can see how for males, mental health, criminal involvement, drugs and housing and alcohol are the top risk factors. This chart indicates for females aged 8 to 24. They're different order of importance compared to the males. So it helps us break down all of the issues that are going on. Chart for 25 to 29, again, you can see the different breakdowns and how they differ between males and females.
Councilor Manson,
So you're listing the risk factors, are they also not interrelated sometimes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, like there's, I never even thought of that. Maybe we could have brought one of the referral sheets for everyone to see, but that actually is a well-made-up document that really has the boxes. It's a checkbox. So when someone brings a referral forward, you'll see shortly that the OPP brings a lot of referrals forward. I've bring a few referrals forward. Bob's brought a few before, but the other agencies only bring them once or twice a year. So we have a really good form. So when they're using that form, it's all right there at the fingertips, and the data then is good. Then we have the next highest category, which was 30 to 39, and we can see the similarities again from the other categories. I think this is one of the slides that everyone wanted to see. So we'll take a minute, take a look at that. That's agency engagement.
And this is in your report as well, if you can't see it up on the screen.
So as you can see, it's color-coded. Like I said, Sarah does wonderful work making these look nice. The originating agency is blue. So the originating agency is who brought the referral forward to the table, okay, which could be any organization that's part of the table. But obviously the majority of referrals are brought forward by the OPP. With hospital, CMHA, K, adult probation, and KCL bringing some forward as well. Also the school boards brought some forward. The next part is the lead agency. That's who takes the majority of the lead. Yes, sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe highlight this for a bit, because we've had a lot of communication, obviously, in our city around safety, and something that I know we've talked about at the police service board is making sure that we're focusing on upstream metrics and that we're not going to police our way out of this. And I think this is sort of indicative of the work that and the great relationship that we have with our OPP detachment, is that you also recognize that this is not just a matter of putting the bad guys in jail, so to speak, and that the majority are being originated from our OPP. I just wanted to highlight that there wasn't a question associated with it. I think sometimes it's tricky because it's not an easy solution, but
I think I really appreciate you bringing that forward, because I don't, does everyone understand, I think, what the council member's trying to say? So, like a lot of these referrals, so I'll make a referral, so we might hear of a 16-year-old youth, let's put it that way, that has gone habitually missing, drugs, alcohol, we have other concerns, we have that in our database. I can see those calls to service being generated over and over and over. I can see what the officers' work we're doing, we can see we're not getting anywhere. So because one agency can't handle something on its own, we're bringing that referral forward as this person's at acutely elevated risk of serious bodily harm or imminent harm or victimization, which I read earlier. So that's why you see a lot of these referrals. So it'd be us trying to refer things because the justice system isn't going to work for this 16-year-old girl. We need to find different ways. And that's where the situation table is really important, because it brings all of us together to think of new outside the box ways sometimes and how do we deal with this issue.
thank you.
So, Councillor Burney.
So yeah, just by looking at this graph, the OPP are like chief cook and bottle washer here. They're doing everything.
Well, we're not the lead agency with Councilor Burney, but yes,
Right.
we tend to have a heavy involvement. That being mainly said because some of the things we're going to talk about in the future here are what's been developed. So our mobile crisis response team, our MCERT teams, they bring a lot of the referrals to the table, but they will also go with other agencies into community to do these interventions, which is something that not all agencies do a lot of in community, not in their offices, but going into community. So having our mobile crisis response team with them gives them that security to know that they can go out and do their work.
I think, yeah, you're being modest. So my question is, why is that graph look that way? Why aren't these other agencies? And Sarah, you mentioned about allocation of resources. Speaking frankly, there's a lot of money being misspent in this community. And I think, quite frankly, across the province, and if not across the country, but we're talking about Kenora. You know, I don't expect you to be critical of any specific agency, but the demographic, or the statistics show here that it's 12 to 17, 18 to 24, and 25 to 29. This 18 to 24, I think that group is, as you mentioned, Councillor, they're commonly referred to as transitional age youth.
TAYs, yes.
Yeah, and there's a program in town, I think that's called TAY, or was. So I think, you know, this is quite stark, this graph, and we wonder why our policing costs are high. We wonder why we're in this negative feedback loop. I think we need to rethink this, and I think these agencies that are at the bottom of this, you know, this chart, I really think that there needs to be an audit of some sort, or we certainly need to advocate for more effective use of resources in this community. And again, I think that you know, our top three that are doing exemplary work, but it just drops off, and I think that needs to be discussed further in more fulsome.
We appreciate the comments, and we will, through the steering committee lens, we dive into, you know, why are these things presenting and what is going on. So we're going to give you a little bit of context of what we've heard from some of those existing organizations, and it's actually opened up my eyes into different areas in regards to even just sort of the identification of children in the school system, as an example, that may have a developmental disability, and when they're being screened and what that planning is occurring. So there's a lot of disconnect that's occurring that we're starting to sort of piece and try to mobilize.
Because we always hear about we're service rich, we have a lot of resources in this community, but as you said, is the funding going to the proper organizations? Is the money being spent properly? And I would think, you know, I don't think it is. So anyway, thanks. Carry on.
Is everyone good with the chart? We can move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the reporting period, this just shows you that we had an overall risk lowered of 28 out of 39, with 6 still being in acutely elevated risk. So we wanted to make sure that was brought clear to everyone's attention. Just because someone's in acutely elevated risk and we throw an intervention, we throw, say, 4 or 5 agencies and other resources at that, that person could be at such a high risk, high level that that might not even have a chance to effectively bring it down. It might take multiple attempts or multiple times at the table. It's not always fixing the problem, but it's a recognizing and coming forward with other solutions.
Yeah, I think this is a really important graph because it's a nice snapshot of sort of the top priorities. You'll see in 2022 things have shifted in regards to the priorities, because originally our first priority was always mental health and cognitive functioning as the primary risk factors. That's changed now to substance issues as being the primary issue in 2022. And then moving into mental health and cognitive functioning. But now we're seeing a lot more of antisocial, problematic, non-criminal behavior, education and employment, and people not engaging in those sort of initiatives, and then criminal involvement. Prior to that, we were really focused on housing initiatives and trying to be able to engage the sector on, understanding what continuum of supportive housing we would require in order to target some of these areas, but we're starting to see that shift. And it'll be very interesting once I pull the next year data to see what other shifts have been occurring. I'm not sure if they're COVID related or if program closures are part of that. We're not sure because we haven't had those conversations at the steering committee, but we have to sort of dissect some of this information.
Just quickly, substance abuse, my question's around, so how much of that is legal substance or controlled substance and how much is illegal?
I've never heard someone bring it to the table and phrase it as a legal substance. They've always phrased it as a negative substance abuse.
Sorry, wording negative then.
Okay. So usually when it's brought to the table, this is the box that's checked off, but people will bring it to the table and say this person has methamphetamine substance abuse issue. This person has an opioid substance abuse issue, or vice versa. They usually name it, but this is the box that's checked off. Does that make sense?
So that doesn't include alcohol?
Alcohol, I believe, it would include alcohol. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think this is really important for the group. So people often ask, and they've asked me from other communities, how we get the table to keep going. The reason the table works is because of the roles and responsibilities in our governance model. You can see they're all listed there. I really wanted to point out the second one. So each charter member directly involved in the operation of the situation table will contribute at least one sector specialist to be available as needed to fulfill the ongoing work to attend regular meetings as determined. So everyone who's part of the situation table has signed an agreement to have someone at that table. So if you see your organization's name on that list, you've signed an agreement to have that representation at the table. So we use the charter to say to people, we need to have someone at the table. And if there's not someone at the table, or we're missing certain organizations for a period of time, as steering committee members, we reach out to the members on the steering committee or in the organizations and ask what's going on. Whether it's movement, well, lately, I'm sure everyone understands, there's been a lot of movement in jobs. So retraining of people and getting people in positions, but it's really important, and everyone, that's why the table keeps working so well, because we have, it's kind of a guarantee, every second Thursday now, you have a place to be at 9 a.m. Some of the other things that have come up since the table was created was creating a designated or backup staff. So I know with us at the OPP, I sit on the table. I try to be there all the time, just as a resource. I've been doing it the longest, but I also have other members that are sitting there and taking turns. So other organizations do the same. They have people who can take turns. And obviously we have the confidentiality agreement, and we make sure everybody's on the same page.
And then CMHA Kenora, like I had mentioned at the beginning, we provide the in-kind support with the facilitation. We have 3 of our core team members that attend. All of those core members are also trained in the RTD database, so they do all the data entry, all in kind from CMHA Kenora, as well as myself sitting on the steering committee as that governance. We're unique in the rest of the province in regards to situation tables, because we're the sole organization and steering committee that has an actual steering committee as part of the situation table model. And that's to continue to engage the movement of understanding the data information and what is actually happening within the sector, so we can mobilize things to move forward, because that's the intention, is we want to see that reduction in what we're seeing and not an increase, right?
Councillor Burns.
Are there any funded positions across the province or in historically within this model as to do the job you're doing at the time?
We have a list from the province. There's a community of practice that meets, I think, on a monthly basis. And there are some pockets of funding through grants that have been applied for, but other than that, there hasn't been any funded positions that I'm aware of.
And what is suggested by the ministry? Is it, you know, that you can just like yourself do it in kind, or that does best practice indicate a dedicated position?
Well, we know from where the model originated, right, and came also from Prince Albert and Saskatchewan as well, that there should be funded resources to be able to do this work. It's quite exhaustive, and you know yourself, when there is that lack of engagement in the sector, we do a lot of work on ensuring that we're engaging those members to come back to the table for that conversation. And that in itself is a full-time role.
And then creating the report, so you can see the report from 20 to 21. Of course, Sarah's still working on the other reports, but it's something we have to do off the side of our desks. You know, it's an extra task, so that's where having someone that could be dedicated would have a giant impact for the city. So here's a list of the steering committee members in 2021. As you can see, they're majority of the, I think, core agencies in Kenora, both school boards, child and family service agencies, hospital, Kenora District Services Board. Okay, so highlights. So what Sarah was talking about earlier was how the steering committee takes gaps in services and discusses them on the data we see from the RTD. And often there are impacts that come from that occurring. This is one of those impacts. So I think we've listed 2 or 3 that have happened in that year. Discuss this one. Okay. So education programming, community services officer program. So it was to increase the collaboration between the school boards, police and youth justice services, strengthen prevention education. So basically an upstream approach on how to tackle early identification of youth disengagement in the school setting. So this was accomplished by frequent meetings between the school boards, mental health, special education needs, child and family services, and youth justice. So there was meetings with child and family services, Child and Family Service Prevention Service to improve coordination between school boards. I think that's a big issue that we've been talking about. School boards updating their procedures for responding to kids at risk with attendance problems. Both boards ensuring that at least one staff member is registered with the Ontario Association for Counseling and Attendance Services to stay informed on attendance issues across the region. Community to work which has helped to increase opportunities for students in both boards to participate in after-school activities, and an increasing collaboration between mental health, special education, and attendance issues. So one of the gaps we noted earlier on before this report was the 12 to 17 youth were constantly being brought to the table, and one of the risk factors were they weren't in school. They were in Kenora, staying in Kenora, 12, 13 years old, not in school, which obviously has an impact on calls for service for one, but also on our community as a whole. So it was brought forward at the steering committee level, how can we address this? Where are the gaps? So are the gaps that individuals or youth are being brought from out of community into community, and no one's telling the school board that they're here now? Are they being asked to leave one school but not being accepted in another? Are they just not going to school? Is anyone driving them to school? Is anyone offering to get them just registered in school? So some of these issues were addressed by working through this with the school boards. Child and Family Services and Youth Justice Services really stepped up to help market plan. So now we have, each school board has individuals hired that track attendance and look for issues. With the school boards, I believe it's 15 straight days, and then you fall off their attendance roster. So that's a flag. So they look and tell us about that, so we can try to intercept and make sure that's not occurring. Because having youth that are missing every day and not attending school is a real problem.
And when we actually dove into this, we really got into the Education Act and sort of the accountabilities, and really sort of process mapped where is the accountability for that flag, where does that start, and then how does that process work. So through that, those discussions, it became a really robust intervention on how those children are flagged in the system, and then what to follow up with.
Prevention services and supports for school and child welfare service. So this was the implementation of the prevention team. So they, what we just talked about, they hired an educational liaison position to work with both school boards, child and family services, and they provided people as well. I forget the person's name actually, but they were very helpful in determining what kids in the care agencies were in school or not in school, and how we could affect them. If they're here in care, then maybe they should be in school.
And these resources came out of that process map discussion, right? Because it was identified that there was a responsibility by those organizations to flag to the education system, and they ended up implementing these roles to be able to support that intervention. Yeah, so this is part of the question around the transitional age use. So through our discussions with our steering committee members, we're learning around sort of how that transitional age use population is identified within the school system. And what we have been told through leadership at that table is that children need to be screened by the time they get to grade 6, and then planning for services need to start in grade 9. Unfortunately, with cuts in services and other system issues, that has not been occurring, and that's a conversation that's ongoing right now on how we're going to be strengthening that process within the education system to be able to support effective planning as children are coming out of the youth sector into the adult sector. So this is part of that conversation. We're being educated on that process. We're working with schools and Firefly and other leadership through the associations for community living to be able to support what that's going to look like, and that engagement of what that system process will need to be, how that will be implemented within our region.
So the coordinated case management model for at-risk youth is something that we're looking at trying to do. The model hasn't been implemented at this time. It's still ongoing. Necessary inspection. And now's our time for questions. I want to do that pretty quick. But questions? Or more questions?
Did you have a question?
No.
So,
Councilor Byrne.
the risk-driven tracking database, Sarah, can you just explain that that's a provincial initiative, and the data, there's a process for even CMHA, and I don't think OPP had a license at one time, but there's a very rigorous process to hold that information, and just how it informs resource allocation. I know we had a presentation from, I can't remember who it was, from the ministry years ago when we were talking about bringing a situation together with Kenora, and it was it's quite complex, and it's it's no small initiative, I guess. So maybe can you just
Yeah,
expand on that
so
bit?
the RTD, which we
Report
call it,
something?
yeah, it's supported through the Soldier Ministry, and there is a rigorous process for access. Each community receives 3 licenses to be able to utilize. Right now, CMHA holds those licenses because we're doing all the data entry and validating, because there's a lot of back-end work that has to occur. Because there is, I think, 300 risk factors on the list. Not everything gets inputted exactly on the date, so we have to go back and do that validation. It is informing system planning at a larger level through the regional HSJCC process. We're using that data because there is situation table models in Thunder Bay that we're connected to, because I co-chair that particular committee as well. So we are identifying Northern Ontario specific issues related to safety that we're moving up to the provincial committee for ongoing discussion. So we are using it in that capacity in the north. We've actually asked that our regional mobilization worker in Thunder Bay, who's funded through CMHA Thunder Bay, is able to get access to all of our regional data, but that hasn't happened yet. That's the first request they said that has occurred in the province around that, but we're hoping that her role will be able to get some more cohesive reports together from a northern perspective, so we can take that forward in a more sort of collective way at the provincial level. We are having those conversations at that interministerial table up at the HSJCC on the provincial level, but it's not as coordinated yet, right? Because they don't have a system yet to be able to support that dialogue yet in that capacity, but we're hoping that through the secretariat that is funded through CMHA Ontario that supports the work of the HSJCC, that we're able to use some of those resources to do some of that collaborative work, but we're just not there yet. But those are some of the discussions we're having.
Thanks. Any other questions? Councillor Hanson.
I just want to say congratulations for the work that you are doing. I know we've got a long way to go, and Kenora is benefiting from what you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bernie.
One last thing, how can the city support you? I mean, we're advocating, we've done some delegations where we've done delegations to the Ministry of Mental Health Addictions. Other than just our support, how can we assist you?
We had this discussion before we came.
So, obviously, if the city was to hire a community safety well-being officer, they'd be someone that would directly interact with the situation table. It would make sense because the data coming from that table is what's going to drive a lot of safety planning for the city. So, if you hired someone like that, that person being interacting or doing some of the work at the table would drive forward a lot of things you can done for the city.
So stay tuned, Staff Sergeant. I'm going to have something on that later in the meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I think in addition to that is around some of the accountability questions and comments that were made today. I think understanding, I would recommend that City Council probably request like Ontario Health North to come to a meeting to do a presentation on what is funded within our community and what that allocation looks like. I would recommend that you do that. And then the second piece is that I'll use as CMHA CEO outside of the steering committee, is understanding the impact of mental health and addictions and the funding restraints that we're in the sense of base budget increases. And you've heard me say on numerous articles and presentations, but we have legacy programs that are at huge risk of closures, and I cannot stress that enough to City Council that we need investments in mental health and addictions in order to support the complexity of the cases that are coming through the system. They no longer are as what they were back in 1997. The complexities, and I've heard today there's concurring issues, multiple issues. The system needs to evolve to that, and we're not there yet, and we need the support in order to do that with increases and also training of staff in order to meet those needs.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
So, moving on the agenda, we're actually going to call on the Northwest Health Unit then. So, Tom, if you want to go next.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to the Part 8 and Small Drinking Water System programs, which is two of the programs that I manage at the Health Unit. So I'll just give a quick overview, very brief, on what these programs are and also how these programs interact with municipalities and other government agencies within our region. So the Part 8 program, so we are the designated principal authority under the Building Code Act to enforce and regulate sewage systems in our entire catchment area. This is similar to other northern health units that do the same thing. Southern Ontario is a different system. They have counties that normally do this, or conservation authorities. Because we have so many different municipalities that cover our health unit boundaries, they went to the health units instead. And it includes both municipal and unorganized territories throughout our area. The program runs as a fee-for-service, so every year we evaluate the cost of the programs and the revenue generated, and it has to be revenue neutral as best we can. So the Part 8 program is staffed by the environmental health team. So we have a CBO, which is myself, also a deputy CBO, 3 Part 8 inspectors that cover, we have one in Dryden, one in Kenora, one in Fort Francis, and 2 program assistants that do all the data entry. Bear in mind, all of these staff are also part of 10 plus other programs that the environmental health team does support. So it's just a small part of their overall role in the health unit. And then services that a Part 8 program provides, sewage systems that are less than 10,000 liters a day, so that we calculate the sewage flow that each facility provides. And these, like to get to over 10,000, those are like big RV parks, large housing developments, stuff like that. Generally, family homes, small commercial establishments would fall under us. Anything over 10,000 liters a day automatically gets kicked to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Land development services, so these are severances, subdivisions, minor variances, and performance level reviews. And I'll go into a little bit further what those actually are. And then permit searches and complaint follow-ups.
Councillor Van Doren.
Sorry, while we're on this page, who does for more than 10? I know nothing about septics.
No, that's
So
okay.
I don't know what size a 10,000 liter per day.
Ministry of Environment.
Ministry of Environment.
I'm sorry, I had a brain fart there.
No, that's okay. Yeah, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and
Thank
Parks.
you.
So those would be like the very large tourist camps in the region, large housing developments, the condos and stuff like that, that are outside municipal treatment systems.
Okay.
So there are 5 different classes of sewage systems. So these are all the different types. So class 1, those are your outhouses. They're regulated, but they're not permitted. So anyone can just go and put an outhouse, not within the municipal boundary, like in town, but out of town where there isn't a sewage system that is being serviced. And they generally partner with a class 2 system, and that's gray water. So anything from sinks, showers, stuff like that. But they're very limited to the size that they can do. So it's usually a kitchen and a 1 bathroom supports a gray water system. Class 3 cesspools, they're not very common. They're usually used for, again, like partnering with a class 2 system for incinerating toilets or other types of those types of toilets that may have a discharge to them. Class 4 is your full septic system, so that's a full field bed and a septic tank, and there's very many different types of products out there that they can do. And that's for your full sinks, showers, laundry. You can't have laundry in a gray water system. And they can accept waste from wastewater or water treatment systems. So that's, if you have backflow or backwashing on your filters and stuff like that, you don't want that going into your. Yes, go ahead.
Where does a holding tank fit in terms of the classification?
That's the next one, class 5. So holding tanks. These ones we do not approve very often. They're very regulated in the building code. as opposed to say like Manitoba, where they're a lot more common. They're very strict in how they can be done in Ontario. So really they're only safe for places that are full bedrock. There's no way you can put in a class 4, or if it's just temporary, so they're looking at doing some development 2 years down the road, they're putting a camper on the property until they get their house built. We could approve a temporary holding tank for the camper, and then moving into a class 4. So we maybe approve a handful each year, but they're pretty restrictive according to the code. It's also not very, like they're useful, but they're a lot of cost on the ongoing because of how often they have to be pumped out. So the process to submit a permit for a septic system is very similar to that of a municipal building permit. So the permits must be filled out. There's a standard permit similar to all the other Ontario building permits in the province, reviewed in full by the CBO. Each permit receives 2 inspections, so an initial inspection. Those are done prior to any building occurring. We go onto the property, ensure that the permit matches what was written in the permit, and what's on the ground, looking at the topography, looking at the vegetation to make sure that the system can be supported there.
Councillor Moncrief.
So can individuals build their own field, or is that something that you have to have a certified contractor to do?
If someone else is building your field, it has to be a certified contractor, and they have to have a BCIN number. However, under the building code, you are allowed to build your own septic system. They still have to follow all the same rules as a contractor would. We inspect them the same as whether they're doing it themselves or a contractor. They have to meet the same standards. Okay, so that's the initial, and then a substantial completion. So that's basically once the field and tank have been installed, and prior to covering, we go and do a check, make sure that it meets all the right parameters according to the code, and then give them approval to cover it over and do their vegetation afterwards. A certificate of completion is issued to the homeowner after a satisfactory inspection. So partnership with municipalities. So in the permitting process, we work heavily with the building department and work together to ensure that our permits do match up. So if someone's applying for us for a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home, the building department also looks at that their permit for building a house is kind of the similar information as well. We also have worked with them so that they don't issue building permits without coming to us first, or the homeowner coming to us first, so that they know that they can install a field prior to building the house. We have run into situations in the past where individuals build large cottages on their property and then don't have any room to put in a field afterwards. So we're trying to get that done before, because that's one of the more important things, especially when we're looking at conservation and the water, that we want to have proper treatment of the sewage to support these buildings. Like I said, allows for checks and balances for any development within a region. The other thing we also do is enforce any increased clearance distances based on municipal bylaws. So the majority of municipalities in our region have doubled the clearance distances to waterways. So the code says 15 meters or 50 feet, but most municipalities have put in a 30-foot, 100-meter rule. And that's again to protect the waterways as well. And there's other governing agencies like the MNR who have even stricter rules depending on things like spawning locations for fish, where there's some clearance distances that you have to be 300 meters from the lake, which is fairly significant.
Councillor.
These things have a life expectancy, right? And so you approve it at one stage and then it's off your books. So let's say, I don't know what the life expectancy is. Let's say it's 10 years, is it? 20?
Generally, if you're taking care of your field and you're treating it nicely, they should last 35 plus years.
So let's say we're at the 30-year mark and they pop up another building on their property that's using the same septic.
Mm.
you're not required to intervene at that point, you're not?
So that's something that I'll go through. So that's usually a performance level review. So if they decide to do a new building, they decide to add on to their building, the municipality will flag that, and the homeowners will be required to come to us, and we'll review what they currently have for a system, and making sure that it is big enough or large enough to accommodate any new development. That may require an inspection, may not, depending on the situation. In cases like what you're speaking to, where it's an old field that we may not even have paperwork on anymore, because we, prior to anything over 35 years, we were purging from our systems. We would go do an on-site, make sure that whatever's there is functioning properly, not having any breakouts or any discharge anywhere, and then approving it.
So the only trigger for an older field would be if the municipality requested it from you?
Correct. Or if there's a complaint. So it's otherwise it's complaint driven. So there are locations in Southern Ontario, there's less than a handful that do have proactive inspections after a certain period of time. However, that's not standard across the province and would be very time intensive, which will drive up costs for this program. So land development services.
Sorry.
Yes.
So my question kind of sort of takes off from Councillor Moncrief, because we've had a lot of discussions with rural residents about the impacts of Bill 23, where, and I won't get into a whole lot of that, but where people may choose to build another structure on an existing piece of property if it conforms, if it can fit on there. But there's been a lot of nervousness from residents in areas where there's water close by about the fact, like what's the process if I have a piece of property and I have a building on it and I'm able to build another 2,000 square foot building on it, it has a field right now. Who determines whether that field has the capacity to take on another structure or a new one, or some other mechanism or some other process has to be put in place to capture that?
So that would be us. So we would review each application. So if, again, they would submit something to the building department saying,
okay,
we're adding a 2,000 square foot guest cottage or 1,000 square foot guest cottage, it would get flagged to us, and they wouldn't issue the building permit until we have a review completed to ensure that it, and we'll say on the report that's provided then to the municipality through the homeowner, whether it meets the recommendations, whether they need to add on to their field, and that kind of gives then an idea to the building department at the municipality how it will need to.
Okay, now just a supplementary to that, because again, we hear from residents that, well, that's not always the process that's being followed, which is problematic for the city and the health unit, because that means someone is pulling a building permit to build a structure, which means that it's kind of hidden. Do you find any issues related to a situation like that?
Yeah, and I'm sure similarly with the municipal building department, we do run into situations where individuals have installed septic fields without a permit. The one caveat is, too, it's a lot easier to deal with within municipal boundaries because there is that check and balance with our partners.
Okay.
In unorganized territories, unless we get a complaint or somehow get knowledge of a building occurring, if they don't submit a permit, we really have no idea what's happening.
Nor with the city. But just for clarification purposes, because we keep hearing this, that it's rampant, which I don't believe. Is it, would you say it's few and far between, where you might end up finding out later?
It is pretty hard to be able to provide a number.
Okay.
We don't find a lot of situations afterwards.
Okay.
But we do welcome any like anonymous complaints or
Right.
discussions that individuals want to have with us to say like, hey, this person down the block is doing huge development and we don't think they're doing this. We would then follow up and look into those situations. If we determine that they don't have a permit or haven't involved us in that development, then we'll reach out and follow up through our mechanisms of the Ontario Building Code.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Byrne?
So, continuing with that train of thought, what's your legislative authority? What type of enforcement action do you take? What if somebody just ignores, which, just anecdotally, what's the process when you have to pursue enforcement?
So, like anything that we do, we try and do progressive enforcement. We feel that it's easier to start with education than go right to fines. For the most part, so through the Ontario Building Code, we do have mechanisms of issuing orders, and those would be legal documents that would require individuals to comply. We provide compliance dates that they have to meet. If they decide not to meet those, then we can go through the court process and deal with it that way through the court system.
Have you had to do that, and what are the outcomes when you go to?
In the last 2 years that I've been a part of this program, as CBO, we've had to do it a couple times, and we've been successful in each of them.
So the person has complied and is through the judicial process?
Yes.
Councillor Van.
I think I'm going to add on to the Bill 23 in this piece as well, because within the Bill 23 Act, the addition of, the new amendments permit landowners to add up to 2 additional resident units as of right for land zone for 1 home in urban residential, which does not apply technically to our rural residential areas, without requiring a zoning bylaw amendment. So I guess I'm thinking of if someone is converting a granny suite or something within their existing home, but maybe it's adding a capacity to the septic. And maybe they're just doing it, they're not pulling a, whatever, I'm just pulling these out of there. We don't have a trigger mechanism to make sure that that septic field is going to be able to still maintain the capacity that it was approved for, correct? I know that this is technically, you should not be doing it that way, but I'm just sort of thinking.
Yeah, I am sure that if there isn't anyone knowing, I'm sure there's lots of cases where people are adding things and not saying, keeping under the radar. I will say a lot, the septic systems in the building code are overbuilt, for the most part, so they can handle a little bit extra. We don't recommend it. We still want them to go through the permit process, but it's.
I think sort of as a follow-up to that, do you, in your opinion, have concerns over if the density in, let's take Oxygen Lake as a example, if we were to double the density in that area from a water quality standpoint, do you see that being a issue?
I think if everything is done correctly and permitted properly through the septic systems, they should be able to do. They make really no difference the size of the field and how they work to impact the water. I think doubling the density will have many other factors on the water quality, but as long as the systems are installed correctly and designed properly, it shouldn't impact. So land development. So this is another thing that the Part 8 program does. So for severances, and the definition that we use as a severance is taking one piece of property, splitting it into 2. And our role is to ensure that a Class 4 system must be able to be installed on each piece of property. So kind of going what was discussed before on holding tanks. If a piece of property wanted to be severed and it could only fit a Class 5, we would not approve that severance. not to say we wouldn't approve it, but we would provide comments back to either the municipality or the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, depending on who's dealing with the severance, that we would not approve that process. Subdivisions are similar, except it's splitting a piece of property into more than two. So if there's 3, 4, 5 pieces of property, we would do the exact same thing, ensuring that a Class 4 system can fit on each one. Performance level reviews, that's something we've already discussed, and that's if there's any alterations or additions to a current structure, we would then review what's currently there for a septic system and whether or not it can be, the system is sized to accept those proposed changes. And all of these, we have forms and paperwork that we provide to the homeowner, who then provides that to the municipality based on their requests. Minor variance rezoning, so that's another thing that we look at. So anything we get from the planning department, from municipalities, or again, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, we review to determine if there's any impact to the septic system. So depending on what's there, what they're looking at changing, the big one for us would be changing from a residential to a commercial, because it's calculated very differently in the building code for sizing of the systems, depending on what the classification of the zoning is. And in these cases, there's a lot of them too that we get everything from all of our municipal partners, so there's some that we wouldn't provide comment on depending on the situation.
Councillor Moncrief.
What's the turnaround time on that? If you're requested for comment or for...
It really depends on what the situation, how the complexity of it. However, we make sure that we provide our comments prior to the date that's listed in the application. So they do have a date of when the meetings usually are, and we provide those comments prior to that.
Thanks.
And that's just the description there, the partnership that we have with municipalities of reviewing those, and if needed, we'll provide consent approval documentation to the landowners for their application. So the other Part 8 services that we do, so permit searches. So this is a very common service for real estate transactions, looking to see what system's on there for that purpose. Right now we go back to 35 years. We're in the process of digitizing all of our permits from 1985. Once that process is completed, and because everything's digital, we will be keeping them on for as long as we have room in our system. That being said, probably 10 years prior to, so 2012 is when we started adding a lot more data sets for location information, so the permits will be a lot more accessible and easier to find. Before that, there's still a bit of a challenge based on the exact information that we have. So just going forward, it'll be a lot easier to find permits. And then complaint follow-up. So we reactively respond to any complaint that's brought into us. It may result in an inspection, may not, depending on what the complaint is. And we actively go out. We can do samples to determine if there's breakout of sewage. Sometimes we just don't even need to do that, and we can see it right there. And then they go through the enforcement process of having those discussions with the homeowners that they need to update their system, submit a permit. If that doesn't go anywhere, then we issue orders and so forth through an order to comply. And then small drinking waters, I'll briefly go through this. So kind of partnering with Part 8, small drinking water systems are public water systems that are non-municipal. So any public location that provides water that's not on a non-municipal or a municipal system would be fall under this category. It does not include designated facilities such as schools, treatment centers, rec camps, and those were regulated by OREG 170 through the Ministry of Environment. The majority of our small drinking water systems are tourist camps, We have restaurants, gas stations, stuff like that are on the side of the road. So the regulation for small drinking water systems is 319, and it includes provisions of water treatment, sampling requirements, and their reporting requirements. It's very similar to 170, except it's not as stringent as that, and that's the regulation that your municipal water treatment plants have to follow. Each premise is provided with a written legal document called a directive, and that outlines all their requirements for their system. Inspections are risk-based, so high-risk premises are done every 2 years, moderate and low risk every 4 years. That being said, we try to get there on a yearly basis, usually for the high risk and moderate, because they're tied to like a food premise, so like an American Plan tourist camp that provides food, so we're there every year and are monitoring those systems a little bit more. All right. Questions?
Councillor Chase.
Thank you. When you were talking about life of the field, you said everything's well maintained. Best case scenario, 35 years. Is that based on full-time use? Like for a cottage property that's seasonal, is it safe to assume that the field life could be potentially longer because it's not being used as much?
Yeah. So again, like if it's not being used, we've seen fields that are 45, 50 years old that are still doing what they were meant to do. We're not seeing breakouts and stuff like that. So it really is dependent on how much you use it, how well you take care of it, what you're flushing down the toilet kind of thing too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, one last comment. So you said, like, I know the health unit's a huge jurisdiction, Northwest Health Unit.
Yes.
So you deal with everything in the rural areas of Kenora that aren't part of our municipal waste system, and all the unorganized?
Correct.
Like right to the border and then?
Yeah, so we're at English River to Manitoba, US, James Bay. And that doesn't include any of the indigenous communities. They're governed by federal counterparts. Yeah.
Oh, okay. One person, so I'm thinking of you in this general area.
As CBO, yes.
Because we have a huge, larger area more concentration of properties than any other part of the Northwest Health Unit.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, how, like, from a timing perspective, and like if there's any ongoing issues where there has to be inspections at a certain point, how is that even possible? Without putting
we have to be very efficient in how we do our work. And in the last few years, we've had to make a lot of changes. Like I've digitized everything. We're moving to digital inspection to be able to keep things moving faster because, and I say like Part 8 is one of 10 or 12 programs that a lot of these staff do at the health unit. So we really have to min-max them to be able to get everything done.
I'm trying to get you an assistant.
Yeah.
But it's a very important issue because we hear more and more of it as we're talking about planning issues, and the government wants housing, and they whatever. But they forget about all these rules and regulations, and then the organizations that have to administer it, because it's not the provincial government that comes in and does this. It's an agency that we help fund.
For sure, and that's something that we look at, like I said, on a yearly basis, looking at our funding, whether we need to upstaff, downstaff, depending on the work that's coming in. And like for the Part 8 program, it's completely self-sufficient. It's funded all through the permits, land development costs, and stuff like that. So we have to monitor that on a regular basis to ensure that we're able to provide the service and be able to pay for it.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very, very good presentation. Well, next, at last, Northwest Business Center. Sorry for having you bounce around on the agenda.
Actually, before they get started, I know everybody knows Allison, but I don't think everybody knows Sierra Parkhill. So Sierra is our new business center manager at the Northwest Business Center. We're very happy to have her there and hear the great work from the business center.
Thank you, Sticks. Kind of stealing my thunder there a little bit. I was going to introduce myself and Allison, but I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I've been the new manager of the Northwest Business Center for 2.5 whole months. It's been a very busy couple months. I'm lucky to have Allison still with the city as a mentor and able to sort of guide me through some of this stuff. But we're here today to give you an overview on the Northwest Business Center for those of you who are unfamiliar with it and highlight some of our accomplishments from 2022. So the Northwest Business Center is one of 54 small business enterprise centers in Ontario. It is funded by the Government of Ontario and the City of Kenora. The Northwest Business Center serves the Kenora and Rainy River District, which includes 18 municipalities, unorganized territory, and 26 First Nations communities. The Northwest Business Center is the premier resource for small business. Our mandate is to empower entrepreneurs with the skills, advice, and resources to start, grow, and prosper. So the small business enterprise centers of Ontario are truly the first stop on an entrepreneur's journey. Often when they ask where do we start, they are directed to the SBCs from various sources, such as the Province of Ontario, local economic development offices, libraries, Employment Ontario offices, Chambers of Commerce, the Government of Canada, local community futures development corporations, and other entrepreneurship support organizations. A few of our core services include free and confidential one-on-one counseling, information and consulting on all aspects of starting and expanding a business, assistance with business plan development, resources for requirements, procedures, and connections for financing, grants, and loans. We are also easy access to business tools and resources, mentoring and networking opportunities, as well as workshops and seminars.
I'm going to talk about some of the 2022 highlights, and I wanted to show some stats here with some numbers. This is comparing 2022 to 2019, and as you can see, numbers have really risen in those couple years over the pandemic. I think that's due to some of the online workshops that we had, the business conversation sessions, which really provided businesses across the region with valuable information that helped them get through the pandemic, or helped many new entrepreneurs who want to start businesses as a result of changing times with the pandemic as well. So just really exciting numbers that you can see there. And just some highlights too from 2023 quarter one. It was a really busy time of year just before CR started. I just wanted to highlight some cool things that happened. So Stace and I went to the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs to present basically the budget of the Northwest Business Center. It was a really interesting process, and I think we did well. We actually kind of spurred on many of the other aspects in the province to go and do the same when those committees were meeting in their regions. Hosted 3 workshops in partnership with Camp Tech. That was funded through the Digital Main Street program that we have special funding for. Those were awesome workshops in person, kind of kicked off that in-person workshop piece again. I was also invited to eCampus Ontario Micro-Credential Forum and presented to over 150 virtual attendees on the importance of micro-credentials for entrepreneurship, specifically related to starter company and how we are able to basically operate as a one-person office in Kenora, but work with many individuals across the Kenora and Rainy River District. So that was really cool. Also partnered with the Lake of the Woods Brewing Company to host a charity brunch in celebration of International Women's Day, and thank you to many of the councillors and mayor in the room today for volunteering for that event to help make coffee and chat with people and serve. Also presented to 7 Generations Education Institute's esthetician class about entrepreneurship and programs for startups. This is something that's always ongoing. We work closely with the high schools. Sierra's been in the high schools several times since she just started in the position 2.5 months ago. So that outreach is so important in trying to get youth interested in entrepreneurship and everything like that. And then also hosted a marketing redefined workshop virtual before March 31st as well. I'm sorry, this is the smallest slide, so I just wanted to highlight some quarter 3 stats. I can't even read my own notes, like pardon me, so lesson learned. It's a little bit bigger here maybe, but I'm just pulling this up. So just inquiries, it was a very busy first quarter, so 424 inquiries. That's through social media, emails, telephone, calls, even text messages. Business consultations in depth, 49 of those. So those are anything that's over 30 minutes or longer that we had. And then in Kenora alone, there was 24 of those in the city here. Business startups and expansions, we had 4, jobs created 11, and event attendance was 95 at some of those events that I mentioned as well.
One of the programs that we deliver through is Summer Company. This program is offered to Ontario students aged 15 to 29 who are returning to school and have a business plan for a summer business. Students receive an award of $3,000, hands-on training and mentoring to start their own business. In 2022, 2 businesses were supported, Marina Richardson in Kenora and Cameron Sneen in Dryden. Outreach to youth is a major part of the delivery of this program. As Allison mentioned, the last couple of months I did 6 different presentations with high schools. A lot of that's just touching on, first of all, the program, but also introducing them to the idea of business and entrepreneurship as a viable career option.
Councillor Marcus.
Is Kids Camp? Is that?
Yeah, so that was a previous program I used to deliver through, it was a project of the CFDC. This is like a step up from that. So that program would have finished, kids would have aged out of summer camp, or like the Biz Kids Camp at 13, and then this starts at 15. So there's a bit of a gap there, but that's kind of how Alice and I used to work together often, was that they would go through my programs and then I would pass them off to Allison in the Northwest Business Center.
So that's no longer going, these kids?
So that was funded through the Head Start and Business program, and then the Business Center, we partnered together, as Sierra mentioned. They don't have funding for the program this year, so as far as I'm concerned, they're not coming back, potentially next year. However, there has been some conversations about maybe doing something internally. We'll talk more about that.
It's a great program.
Very good program. Yeah.
Another one of our big programs is Starter Company Plus. So this is for 18 and up. It includes one-on-one guidance, training, and training to complete a business plan and the opportunity to apply for a $5,000 grant. Business training can feed into any NOHFC, business loans, and other funding opportunities such as the Community Futures Development Corporations or an Anishinaabe ASCII Development Fund. Last year, 12 $5,000 grants were awarded through the Starter Company Plus program, and 5 $5,000 grants were awarded through the Starter Company Plus Indigenous Stream program. The Kenora businesses that received the grants in 2022 were Christina Duval through Live Free Training, Vic Moss of Mosswood Adventure, Jason Duguay of Whiskey Delta Metalworks, and Jason Nyberg of the Web Design. In 2022, Starter Company Plus had 33 applications, 31 completed the business training, and 12 received the grant. With Starter Company Indigenous Stream, there were 41 applications through just the one intake, and 13 businesses started the training program and 7 completed the training. We just opened a new intake at the end of April. We had 18 applications, and I am actively working with 8 different individuals throughout the training now.
Next, we want to show a video from the Starter Company Plus Indigenous Stream program. So just a little quick update on that. That was some special funding that the Business Center received in 2021 to deliver basically one cohort of training in the first quarter of 2022. So that was super successful. Sierra mentioned those numbers. So we do have a video that highlights 4 of the 5 grant recipients from that program. And Matt Kennedy from Upriver Media put together this video, and it's just really special to check out. So.
Just one second. I should put this back in. All the noise.
a huge help for me. They have pushed me to do things that are a little bit harder than I was initially prepared for, and it's been so good. My name is Dina E. I'm from Dryden, Ontario, and my business is called Just Die.
I'm Jason Duguay, and I'm the owner-operator of Whiskey Delta Metalworks. We create custom handmade knives and small blacksmithing items.
My name's Garrett Breer. I live in Couchiching First Nation, and my business is auto detailing and window tinting.
I'm Jason Nyberg from Kenora. My business is Lake of the Web Design.
Just Die is a clothing company that focuses on upcycled garments and accessories, as well as natural dyes and eco-prints.
Lake of the Web Design is a web development agency that focuses on custom web designs, landing pages, social media videos, anything web related.
Everyone's been really happy with their vehicles. So far, I've been working every day.
I'm super busy going to markets this summer. I think I already have like 20, so I have to get sewing now.
I looked online for agencies that could help me, and I found the Northwest Business Center.
I'm really glad I took the initiative to apply to this program.
They've helped me prepare my business plan.
They helped a lot. They're really good to work with.
I would recommend it to anybody.
I was really happy to find that the Northwest Business Center has an Indigenous stream for this program.
It's great to have the support for Indigenous entrepreneurs and businesses.
If you're a young entrepreneur in Northwestern Ontario, definitely reach out to the Northwest Business Center.
If you have an idea, take the lead.
You never know what's going to happen. It could be great.
It all pays off in the end. Hard work pays off.
It's been nothing but a fun ride so far.
Basically, I'm just super excited.
I should also mention we were one of 2 small business enterprise centers in the province of Ontario to get this special funding. So that was a huge honor, and I think with the numbers you can really see that we made an impact in the region, and built on some key relationships that we have within the Northwest Business Center as well. So that was a great program. Hope to maybe see it come back to life with a future partnership, so stay tuned to that too. Just want to highlight the Digital Main Street and Digital Service Squad as well. So this is another funding program that we deliver. We applied for the Digital Service Squad 4.0 program last spring, and we're successful in receiving that. So that allows us to have 2 contracted squad members to work with businesses in terms of helping them with their digital transformation of their businesses. So that could be helping them with website, e-commerce, POS systems, client relationship management tools, even helping them with social media or taking photos of their business to help put online. So we have Vic Moss in Kenora and Miranda Patterson in Fort Francis. So this is the 3rd kind of grant that we've applied to under this umbrella. But since July of 2022, the Digital Service Squad has worked with 145 businesses to provide that support. And 25 of those businesses have received a $2,500 grant that has supported them through their digital transformation. So those grants are really earmarked to brick and mortar businesses, so anyone basically with a storefront can apply to a grant. It literally takes like 2 hours to apply, a really simple process, and can really be really impactful for their business. And then I just want to mention too, this is another great partnership with the Business Center, the Northwestern Ontario Innovation Center, and the Northern Ontario Angels. So we worked together as a planning committee to plan the 2nd annual Pitch It event. So we had our first one last year, which was virtual, and then this year we just built on it. The City of Kenora is also a key sponsor of this program. We actually raised in sponsorship dollars more funds than any other Northern Pitch It event, so that's really great for our region. And we had, it's a virtual event, so it's pre-recorded, and 5 businesses pitched their event. If you haven't checked out the pitch video, I suggest to go and do it. It's NWO Pitch It, and you can see it on there. But thrilled to say that Vic Moss from Mosswood Adventures was a first place winner. She won first place, but also the People's Choice Award, which is a new addition. So she walked away with $6,000 which is just fantastic for her business. Many of you have seen she's expanding her business into the summertime and being set up at Garrow Park, so just a really great addition to the community as well. We'll look forward to working on the third annual pitching event too.
Councillor Munker.
Sorry.
What are the Northern Ontario Angels?
So the Northern Ontario Angels is an organization that is basically made up of investors, potential investors that can support other businesses. So locally here we have Ron Malachowski is the angel representative. So folks can reach out to him if there's interest from the angels. Basically, they're private investors. You can also refer folks to Sierra or myself, and we can always connect them too if you're interested.
Councillor Manson.
I just wanted to let you guys know, myself and my son both used your services and they were excellent. My previous owner, who I worked for before at PP Rickford, we sent many businesses your way, and we never ever heard anything but good things about you guys. So thank you.
Councillor.
Oh, sorry, you're not finished. Do you want to finish or do you?
So moving forward, we have a grant review committee for our current starter Company Plus program in July, and then the second application period will be opening in September. We have currently one summer company participant from Dryden, and we have one more spot available. You know, anyone between 15 and 29. We are planning for Kenora Small Business Week events, which will start this summer, and district outreach in the fall, along with some workshops. If you are not following us on social media, please do so. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter at nwbiz.ca.
Did you have that question?
Yeah, I do. So I'm just wondering if, under the normal course of your business, if you do things like community profiling, employment needs, emerging sectors, economic opportunities, do you track these things from the people that come in? Is there any sort of...
So the information, so we do lots of reporting that gets fed directly to the ministry, and that we do have as part of, our department as well. Much of that information that you're mentioning would funnel through the economic development department, so myself at the city or even the Coochie would have that. Sierra would be providing that information to clients who are looking to do market research or information basically to find out if their business is going to be viable in that community, so she'd have access to that information too for Kenora and also the other areas that she works into.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you
So,
so much.
and again, apologize for the wait to get up here. So.
Thank you.
Okay. That's fine. Okay, we're gonna just take a quick pause and not, if people want to get a coffee or have a restroom break. Okay. Okay, so we're back in public session again. So our next deputation is customer service representation, and in place of Kelly is Heather.
I'll take zero credit for this presentation. Kelly is under the weather today. Our customer services manager and deputy clerk, she's under the weather and very disappointed she can't make this presentation today. She's very passionate about moving forward and enhancing our customer service and improving our customer service delivery. She's been working very hard with the various departments and really focusing on the strategic plan. So on her behalf, I hope that I can do justice to what she prepared today for you. Moving my slide. So service delivery and organizational capacity is one of our 5 strategic pillars under our strategic plan. So internally, when we were reviewing the strategic plan and talking about how we're moving the strat plan forward under the service deliver area, one of the key focuses was to modernize a lot of our services and how we reach out to the public and how the public can reach out to us. So striving to provide better access for our residents through exceptional customer service, and again, providing increased access for customers to reach us. Investment in our staff and seeking honest feedback from customers and broader community is a priority. So again, later today, you're going to see the customer service or the customer service policy and complaints policy. We're going to discuss those later, but the two of them really do tie to this presentation, and that is why we wanted to move forward with it today, even with Kelly being absent. But again, in order to deliver the services to the next step, we needed to modernize what we were doing in our existing practices. So customer service resolution goals is we're striving on a first point of contact resolution. So our front staff, bless all of them, are now our first point of contact for citizens. So you're calling, emailing, going through our citizen request portal, and speaking to our customer service staff. So that customer service front office receives the inquiry. They're the first point of contact for resolution. They continue to receive extensive training in the various areas and departments of the city. There are primary areas, we receive a lot of calls about snow plowing, grading, watering in the spring and fall, or maybe throughout the whole season. So those are typical types of questions that they receive, and they have scripting on how to manage those. So if they are simple things that they can answer, they're going to provide the answer to the customer, and hopefully that customer feels satisfied. If it's something that they cannot answer or something that needs to go further, then a service request is logged and then directed to the appropriate department. So what is a service request? A request for service is made on behalf of a citizen for a specific service that they're looking for, or a scheduled service that was not provided on time. So an example of that would be garbage. It was your garbage day, but your garbage didn't get picked up. So that they would call in here. We would log that. It gets immediately directed to the transfer station. The manager then can have a look at that and resolve that quickly. And customer complaints will be handled through the corporate complaints policy that council is also considering today. So the 5-step service request process, we're going to give you a little bit of a sample here in a bit. Submit requests through customer service information. Sometimes that information is not the customer's address, the physical address where they reside. Sometimes the information they're providing is for a different location. So the front staff will go through that and filter the information as the request is coming forward. The request received by the corresponding department will receive an email notification. The receiving manager or designate reviews the service request and assigns a worker in priority sequence. When I say priority sequence, that doesn't mean today, right now. There are work plans in each department. So when something comes in for a request, they can't just jump and do that request right now, because they might already have a work plan to be in a different area today, or already have a full scheduled plate. So when I say priority area, it's prioritized in, obviously, if it's something that's urgent, someone's, water is backing up in their basement, that's a different type of service request than generalized service request, hey, when is my street getting plowed? So the manager will identify those priorities. And then customer follow-up if required. Service requests are closed but will remain in the system to identify patterns. So I'm going to get into here in a bit about our software that we're using to handle these and now track, so that we can see historical usage and typical complaints or requests for service. So ways to reach us, again, sorry.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you could speak to, how long have you been using the software for?
So Public Sector Digest, I'm going to get into that in a couple of slides, but Public Sector Digest has actually been, there's several modules to it. And it's been in the workplace for probably 4 years, 3-4 years. I'm looking at Ryan, but sorry, Ryan. But we were using the asset management portion of it.
Okay.
So the service request was really launched in January, where we were using another component, maintenance manager, for different portions, where Sean Clifford, who's our facilities coordinator, he was coordinating internal works, so park requests, things like that. We've just been adding to those modules over the last year.
Thank you.
No problem. So different ways to reach us: phone inquiries, citizen request portal, in person, and email. By phone, they can call City Hall, and this is going back to that one point of contact. So not calling over to operations or trying to track down the road supervisor or the roads manager. It's one point of contact and calling during regular office hours. The after hours line is a line that is answered. It's primarily for water and sewer after hour calls, but it is done through a call center. So then it pushes the call to whoever's on call for water and sewer. And then the pothole hotline, of course, which I know every member of council is very familiar with and can recite the number themselves for all the calls that they get about potholes. But I think they're doing an incredible job this year. The roads department is really, with their new little toy that they have, that they've added to their fleet division, they're pretty excited about their potholes this year. So the citizen request portal, Heather's going to try to click on that link. You would see this is live. When we were launching this policy or bringing it forward to council, we had intended to kind of do a splashy launch on this citizen request portal at the same time. It's a bit of a soft launch for the last couple of months, so in the background we've been having people use it and find it kind of accidentally, but we plan to actually announce it now today after our presentation to you and really start to promote this tool. So this allows residents to log their own requests 24/7. It's very simple to complete, and I can tell you that every manager is really noticing that this is now live on the website, because there is an increased amount of, Heather, the enforcement services manager, will tell you that it's much easier now for people to just self-report. So we're seeing an increase in those types of requests being logged. Thank you. So in-person inquiries, we have seen since we've launched the one-stop service model, we've seen actually an increase in in-person inquiries. We've seen more foot traffic coming in and more people visiting City Hall. Could be the end of the pandemic, we're not sure, but we are seeing an increase in foot traffic coming into City Hall. Email inquiry, if you have email inquiries, they go to a generalized service and they're responded to and redirected from there. Most of those emails we will log into our system so that we can track them the same way they would if they were a self-reporting tool, or if the customer service rep was receiving that call and logging it on their behalf. So internal view of Citywide. So this is PSD Citywide is our maintenance manager and manages our service requests. So you can see it's very streamlined. It's very simple for our staff to use. They enter the customer information, including name, address, and contact. They select the issues, which are drop-down boxes. There's lots to choose from. That best addresses what they're calling about. They enter the details, such as the department, type of request, and priority, which is predetermined based on the type of request that they're calling about. But the CSR can also add a higher priority if it's something that is coming back to us. And then add detailed notes and attachments such as photos, emails, and voicemails. This is a fantastic tool for us that we've not had in the past in order to maintain that historical knowledge and things that, especially for bylaw enforcement, they can go back and see things that have been submitted in the past. This is the same information that if you're doing it yourself online, basically the same thing that gets pushed automatically, and then an email pops up to the manager, whoever the reporting person is. Departmental view of service requests. So this is what staff see internally. It easily identifies open service requests It's searchable by address, type, priority, status, and date, and it remains in the system after the service request is closed for records, reporting, and identifying the trends. So you can see how easy it is to see, you know, what categories remain open and what are closed. It also prompts, if something is still open, it sends you another little, hey, this is still open. Hey, still open. So eventually they go, okay, I need to make sure that's followed up on. I said if they don't start responding quicker, then we're going to send more frequently. And then get really so PSD Citywide is a combination of tools that are working, as I said earlier, collectively together. So it's a centralized maintenance management program. It's efficient and provides the service request and work order creation. And the maintenance manager modules work directly with the asset manager to identify the deficiencies and help the municipality identify where to invest resources in the future. So you can see the various modules that we work through under this program. Is there any questions?
Councillor Moncrief.
I think for me, the missing piece is as a customer or client or complainer or complainer. So, you know, I send my information into the ether and then nobody gets back to me until it's time to deal with it. So you're getting reminders, or your peeps are getting reminders saying, this is incomplete. But the person who made the complaint never really is aware on if it's getting worked on, if anyone even knows about it, if it got passed on. So I think that's a missing piece, and it may cause more problems because then they're gonna follow up. So then they're having to go back to the system. What do you think about that?
So the customer service policy that we're going to discuss later is a policy that holds staff accountable for what their responsibilities are under customer service for the city. It is one piece that we've really identified is that when you do self-report, you get an email right away back that says, thank you for reporting your matter, it's been redirected. So we've talked about adding enhancements to that email that says, you know, if it's hard because it's a general email response. So you can't say that you're going to get an email or an answer back. So if you report a pothole, we're not going to call you back to say the pothole's been filled. Those are just, it's going to get logged in priority order. So right now it's thank you for your email. Your request is being logged in priority order. So we've talked internally about how we can make that a little more expanded so that people know that you're not going to get an email back on every single service request that you log. So we'll take that back, and the team continues to meet on this. We're excited about how it is advancing us, but we understand and recognize there's still room for improvements in the various departments.
I think as a follow-up to that, and I don't recall correctly, but I think as part of the policy, it was like there was a 2 days of acknowledgement of receipts. So not that everything was going to be necessarily, this has been finalized, but we're going to acknowledge everything that's come in. And I guess, yeah, I think that's fair as far as you said to expanding maybe people's expectations as to what that means when they submit.
There's definitely, internal as this once council approves this policy, then we'll be rolling it out to staff through our SEEDS group, which is our managers and supervisors group. We'll be rolling that out, explaining the policy and making sure that staff are aware and understand the expectations under the policy. And then after that, obviously addressing any things that are not being responded to quickly. So Kelly, the customer service manager, spends most of her, I shouldn't say most of her day, that's not fair. She spends a lot of time managing and monitoring the system. You know, what is not being answered. And she is contacting different departments to say, hey, this is still outstanding. Can you have a look at this? Or where's your priority on this? We need to respond. So she's doing great work there. And she's continually meeting with the different managers and really trying to impress upon the different divisions what the impact is if you don't respond or if you're not managing these the way it's intended to be, because it does have an impact on what the city overall and what we are trying to move to as far as the one set model, the modernized servicing, and providing excellent customer service to our citizens. So again, once the policy rolls out, we really need to have a very in-depth conversation with our team as a whole and really impress upon the importance of the modernized process for service requests.
Councillor Manson.
I kind of agree with Lisa. I think the most important piece in this whole thing is our customers. And if I make a complaint, I expect it to go to the right person. But somewhere down the line, I want to know it's been done. Yeah, and I think like you have this is great, but too bad when it was completed, it wouldn't be a button that goes to the person that complained, this has been completed. And how long is too long for a complaint? Because we're hearing, I reported it 2 years ago, I keep reporting it. When does it become a priority?
Yeah, and I can't generically answer that because you don't know what the complexity of that question is or what that complaint is. If they're, sorry, Kyle.
No, keep going.
If a customer is, they feel there should be another arm put onto the end of their road because that gets them there faster. Well, that's a little more complex than just when you're going to be here to plow my road. So it's hard. I can't give one generic answer for every single service request, but I can say that if there is something outstanding that has been logged through our system, before this, people had it in notebooks on their desks. And so you just have to hope that somebody remembered that was asked for 5 years ago, but we didn't have records. So we've modernized this now. And if there are outstanding service requests that are sitting in notebooks, they need to be logged in here. And I do know that from here on forward, it is being monitored and responded to as quickly as we can get responses from internal departments. So again, it's an organizational responsibility. It's not just customer service, the front staff that are logging these calls. It's not the corporate services department, it's an organizational responsibility. And so that will be, Kyle's message to the staff, that this is an expectation. It's an expectation of this council and a priority for this council to deliver excellent customer service, but it comes from all of our staff across the organization.
Yeah, so I just really wanted to underscore the advent of the technology at the city is still very new. But I cannot express enough how important it is that we are following and using this system. So just as some examples, because I get the same types of emails and things that you do. And people say to me, Kyle, I brought this up 5 times. And when I go to the staff and I say, can you tell me what we have in the system on this complaint? Nothing. So it's not enough to stop the roads manager at the grocery store.
No.
It's not enough to call and leave a message. We really, I know that maybe, I know the city is maybe changing the way it's addressed complaints in the past. So I just really want to express to council and express to members of the public that this is the best way, the most effective way, the most efficient way that we're going to process your complaints going forward. So that is the expectation that we're trying to reset for the community. And then, we need to make sure administration needs to take responsibility over the timeliness, over the responses coming back. But, again, popping into City Hall and mentioning something, stopping somebody, telling somebody during an interaction, leaving an email for a director, we're really trying to provide core messaging and scripting back to the individual to say, hey, please call 467-2000, or please go in and log the complaint.
Councillor Koch.
I just wanted to say, you said it's not enough to stop the roads manager at the grocery store. But please don't stop the roads manager at the grocery store.
Unfortunately, the public will stop any employee. You'll recall that, Councillor.
Yeah, well, and to that point, stopping Councillor Manson and letting her know about something, you know, like, council's very good at passing those messages on to me, and I do my best to pass them on to the team, but again, when those, we need to get those logged to make sure that they're in priority sequence. So, yes, thank you, Councillor Koch, I do appreciate that, but also a little, you know, public service announcement, you know, telling your councillors not necessarily going to get it done the quickest either, and I understand that may be a change, you know, to maybe how things were done 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but this is, you know, we're really trying to make use of the best technology that's available to municipalities to try and make sure.
Yeah, the centralized system, I think, is great.
Yeah, and we appreciate the public's patience and council's patience while we do work through some of the challenges with this transition. I'm not going to, it is a transition and there are going to be some bumps along the way, but we hope that the public and council sees that part of, well, the vast, you know, majority of the direction that we're trying to go is in response to the concerns we've heard around customer service. So thanks for listening to me. I just wanted to hit on those couple of points.
And if I could just put one more public plug into just how council handles, again, respecting that your citizens are always going to reach out to you. They elected you, they want to, you know, speak with you and talk to you about their concerns. But really, if we could have councils buy into this program and councils buy into this process as well, have you contacted staff? Have you reported this? And if they have and they haven't received, then fair enough. You know, then complaining to council, I understand their position. But often, the emails that Kyle will send to us or concerns that he's received from members of council, often we can search. No one has heard from anybody in the public on that particular matter. So they've gone directly to a member of council and hasn't, you know, they've circumvented staff. So I'm not saying always, but often. So if we could just have council plugging that, you know, there's a self-reporting option, they can call City Hall, they can log these things. That will also help streamline things.
Yeah, and just one more thing that I was going to say, you know, the all these things are connected, right? So it may seem like, you know, if you get to the front of the queue, your thing is going to be dealt with, and that's going to solve your issue today. One of the other things that we hear a lot as city administration is, where's the plan? How are you planning out the work? And you know, certainly when I first got here, you know, in the absence of sort of the direction that we're going, you know, if you get 10 or 12 complaints around snow, and then you pass those on, and you have to understand too, so it's important to the mayor, it's important to a councillor, it's important to the CAO, it's important to my boss, it's important to my manager. The staff go out and they try to deal with these things, but they're not necessarily dealing with them in a coordinated fashion, which means then the work that we had planned for that day isn't necessarily being done. So I know it may seem counterintuitive. I want my complaint front of the line, dealt with immediately. And you know, to your point, Councillor Manson, we are still going to have to work through sort of how do things get prioritized. And typically they're going to be prioritized around, are we meeting the level of service? Is it creating a safety issue? Right, and then sort of working back from there. And there are some issues that may be reasonable to take a longer time to respond to than others. So I just, you know, wanted to put that in there too. This is all interconnected, and you know, when we're expecting to carry out our work in a coordinated fashion, we want to give the managers and the supervisors an opportunity to kind of look at the body of work that they might have in front of them that particular week and try and plan it out in a sensible way to make sure that we are getting our core work done in addition to responding to complaints as they arise.
And I think a lot of those complaints will go away if some of the complaints are looked after and reported back to the customer.
Yes.
I think that would be a big help.
I might be getting ahead of myself, but I just would hope that part of the unveiling of the new reporting tool is a lot of communication about our expectations going forward with how this will be utilized. So we hopefully will all co-sign on to this at this level and within the staff. And then I think it's imperative that we're making that clear from a communication place, like, hey, don't call so-and-so, call here. Hey, don't, you know, I think it's important that that's often and heavily underscored to make sure that this is used.
And the
properly.
understanding process.
Yeah, we're gonna need to be
So I have a question. I don't know if who it would go to, but it's along this line. But when we have supervisors out driving around and they're out and about all the time, every day. When they see something in that, are they logging? Like, what's the process for, we're talking about the general public, what's the process for staff? Because I can cite many examples where I've driven by stuff and I've gone, like, another year, like, who hasn't seen this? When I see something every day, you know, like, what's the mechanism for that? And is it, again, I understand, you know, budget and prioritizing and that, but some of these things, and then what happens is that's when people turn around, because I get a lot of calls, and they say, well, you know, I've been looking at this for a couple of years, I've reported it, and maybe it was under a different regime and or council and with staff, and nothing's been done. So that is a direct reflection back on not only the organization, but all of us, like collectively council and staff. And that's one thing I think we need to sort of work on, because a lot of these things are health and safety issues and that, and I see them all the time. I'll cite examples in that. When I've been out to play areas and that, I don't know what I know what the laws are for inspecting and looking after things. And I have to tell you, I'm skeptical about what's being done at some of these locations, like with play structures and other structures that are within the city. And I have to tell you, not like some of the stuff I know at a school board, not the thing would be shut down because it would have been identified right away or it would have been dealt with. And that's, I mean, one example of many. But I just, like, I hope this is working. This is a two-way street where staff are utilizing this also and plugging things in, because they may see something and maybe it goes to another area of the organization. But that's what will help us not get, you know, like yesterday I got 14 calls about 3 things. You know, so 2.5 hours on the phones trying to explain the same thing. And I know these things have been identified in years past. Well, you know, that's not going to help us as council and help us get into this new regime, which I'm all in favor of with governance, if things aren't being dealt with. Because I've always told people what Heather had mentioned. I said, you know, report it, do this, like go through the proper channels, and in 10 days, if something hasn't happened in that, then I will look into it, and I will still continue to do that, because that's a customer, it gets back to customer service and things of that nature. So I think this has to be a buy-in by everybody in the organization, as you said, including us. I know, because I know we're a cog in the wheel here, and sometimes we create more issues than maybe we should as a council. But we also need to see that things are getting done.
Well, you know, I understand, you know, council's the immediate, you know, link to the public, right? So I certainly understand that. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Look, the foundation for any process that we have internally is around expectations, okay? So the process that we're going through right now is establishing the expectation, and as Heather said earlier in her presentation, this is going to be the expectation that we look back to hold staff accountable. And so, you know, we're only as strong as our weakest link. You know, if one department's knocking it out of the park and something is in the handoff to another department is not going effectively, you know, we're going to have to monitor that and work through that. But this will be the expectation that's set. We might want to go to Councillor Van Bellingham, but I do want to maybe open it up to our team a little bit, because I know the senior leadership team has been involved sort of from start to finish on developing this, which is why, you know, we've taken a little bit longer to make sure we get it right.
I just want to highlight a piece, because I don't want it to get glazed over. You said that requests were sitting on people's desks in notebooks, and then we're surprised that there was no follow-up mechanism. So I understand everyone's sort of like feelings of, because that is not a system that is going to, you can't have your system live within individual human beings' heads. That's not going to create any kind of functioning response or anything like that. So I know when the credit union went through something similar with the customer relationship management system too, because it was the same thing. People are coming in and they're telling their story to so-and-so, 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 and you don't have any record, and so people are wasting their time, and it's a friction thing. So I think this is, I think we have to sort of maybe just remember what the system was before and not apply that to this going forward, and it'll take time. It's change, and change has growing pains.
So if Heather and the chair would indulge me, I'd like to throw it to Director Marsh to maybe speak, and then Director Breen has the, I think, unenviable situation of having the vast majority of these things fall under his purview. So he may want to share his perspective on this as well.
So I think what's important, just to acknowledge what the mayor had shared, over the past 2 years, we've looked at how are we actually managing and tracking those. So just like, a citizen, the members of the staff can also log incidents within the system. We have a route patrol individual who's inspection based that actually, especially for our hard infrastructure, our roads, sidewalks, etc. Now that individual is actually logging their inspection instead of actually filing a report or handwritten. They're logging in the system, which is feeding into this. So before you have access to analyze trends or identify how long that request has been active, there was no way in identifying hotspot areas. And even if they may be common knowledge, no one knows if somebody has it. So to your point, Councillor Van Bellingham, this system now really provides the mechanism for us to be able to go back and to track and to say how long and what's the status. And if there is a larger plan, that ultimately leads into our communications around, hey, we know this is an issue, here is the follow-up that is actually happening or what's anticipated. So a number of initiatives have been put in place to align this with our claims process and our human resource staff.
Yeah, just a note on maybe the prioritization piece. The items that have come through from council, through Pabs and myself, I make sure that, we investigate those thoroughly so that we have a good understanding and we're able to respond in a timely manner within the same day or the next day to the resident who voiced the concern. And then, but I do make it clear with staff that it's important that we don't sacrifice our core scopes of work in order to tend to issues that aren't, top emergency priorities. And so I do work with our managers to ensure that we are fitting those in throughout, upcoming days, or in some cases it's a week and a half until we can get to an item based on the priority of the core other work that we have going on. So we're evaluating it on a case by case to ensure that emergency issues are getting dealt with swiftly and issues that are more priority are fitting in alongside similarly prioritized work on our core service delivery.
Heather, thank you for indulging the sidebar.
Anyways, thank you very much. We're actually, I think we'll even have some time before we adjourn for the planning meeting to start going through the agenda. So we're going to start with our favorite one is under corporate services, council committee work updates. And please keep in mind this is for council or committees that councillors are on. It's not a whole other piece, it's just for strictly the committees. So I'll start with, how about Councillor Benson?
I have nothing to report.
I'm really quiet to me.
Well, I know you're ready. I see you got your computer ready. So, Councillor Koch?
I had all this stuff written down, but now you kind of narrowed the scope of what we're allowed to say. So I will just speak to the museum board. We held a farewell for our outgoing director, Laurie Nelson, which was really well attended by former staff, former councillors, former directors on the Muse board, seasonal and local residents. Really great turnout to celebrate somebody who has given so much of herself and her gifts to our community over her very lengthy career. So that's the highlight, I guess, for that. And I suspect Councillor Moncrief might share some of her context around that event, maybe.
Councillor.
I don't have an awful lot to report from bids. We didn't meet last month, but we're supposed to be meeting tomorrow. So hopefully I'll have more of an update at the next meeting regarding bids. I did speak to, I mentioned this before, I talked about a possible Henny Pen Lane beautification project that the bids could possibly be involved in. So I look forward to continuing that conversation tomorrow night at our meeting. My second board, three I guess, is our Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, and that's in the offing. And I know Kyle has some information that's going to dealing with that board and the formation of it and when it's going to possibly be operational. As far as the Northwestern Health Unit, I unfortunately wasn't able to take advantage of this opportunity. It just took place here. It's ending today. It's the Association of Local Public Health Agencies Conference and AGM in Toronto, and section meetings as well. Would have been interesting. I just wasn't able to get away to it. And our Trudy Sachowski, who's a board member, is actually I mentioned this before, the association president and conference chair, so she plays a very large role. Conference is held at the Dalla Atlanta School of Public Health at U of T, and there's some interesting keynote speakers. Dr. Karen Moore was speaking. They're talking about just emerging from the pandemic and associated issues. It would have been fascinating to be there, but I wasn't able to make it. The Northwestern Health Unit is also submitting delegation requests for AMO, and we're just trying to find out what board members are going to be attending. I'm going to be attending with the city, so stay tuned for more information about that. I don't know if I've offered to, I will certainly be part of these delegations if there's an opportunity, but again, I defer to Dr. Kip Young and Marilyn Herbatch to be able to speak, and our chair, Doug Lawrence. But I certainly want to be involved in that if I can. And the 2022 annual report is been compiled. It hasn't been released publicly, but that's something that will be being released to the public imminently, and it contains interesting information, and look forward to seeing that and having it available. So that's about it for me, Adam.
Councillor.
I just have the Sustainability Advisory Committee met, and the suggestion was made about a large signage at the transfer station, because free cycle days, which take place May long and Labor Day weekend, the uptake wasn't good. So the feeling was that people weren't aware of it. So the feeling was they wanted permanent signage. If they're going to happen the same weekends every year, then people can prepare for that when they go up to the transfer station, see the sign. And there is also an ongoing discussion about reopening the reuse area of the transfer station and how that can be managed. One man's garbage is another man's gold, I guess is the. I have a lot of other updates, but I won't do them because we're.
Well, no, we spend the time.
Right.
Spend the time, so if you have a few more items, then
Okay, so the airport is again at a situation where they're trying to attract new airlines and to add to the flight schedules coming and going. And the Logistics Services Board is always interesting, and there's a lot going on there, and not a lot that I can talk about in open. So that's about it for me.
Thank you. I don't have any updates from the Accessibility Advisory Committee because we also haven't met. We're meeting tomorrow, so I'll just take a second to plug that there is still vacancies on that committee. So if anyone wants to join, there's a link to sign up on the website. For the Police Services Board, I attended the Ontario Association for Police Services Board Conference in Niagara the end of May 31st to June 1st. Myself, the board chair, Sarah Diaz, and members Jennifer Katowski and Dave Canfield, and then as well as Detachment Commander Duggan was there, and myself and Detachment Commander Duggan were lucky enough to run into the Solicitor General, Mr. Kersner, briefly on his way out of a keynote speech, and we just took the chance to highlight the way that the costing model impacts regions in the north inequitably, and he did bring up that one of the ways to get down our policing service is reducing calls for service, and Detachment Commander Duggan did remind him that we have been trying to look at ways for loss prevention and mitigation through the LCBO, which have not been, that have been stalled through that board. As far as the conference itself, the association, I think, we are currently going through some legislative changes for governing police services boards. So we are going to need to look at doing a little bit more advocacy around creating best practices going forward. And myself and the Mayor of Red Lake, Mayor Mota, took some time to ask questions during the question period, again, around our policing costs and how our association is advocating for police services boards across the province. One thing I just wanted to highlight was that so there's different kind of police services boards in the province. We are an OPP police service board. So in one of the breakout sessions, we were ourselves and Red Lake and only one other area in Ontario who have OPP boards. We're the only ones who brought our detachment commanders with us. And I just want to highlight this because we came by far the farthest. It was a conference in Niagara where most of the surrounding municipalities have to drive, 2-3 hours kind of thing to achieve this. And I know there wasn't budgets in the OPP to cover this, but I just wanted to highlight that piece because when we are speaking about police costing over and over and over again, we're not talking about the service, we're not talking about a relationship with our police staff and members or anything like that. The way this costing model is set up is inequitable, and this is something that sitting at this police service board, we have sent them advocacy around this and they have not taken it up at their level. So I'm hoping going forward that we'll be able to be a little bit of a stronger voice around that and around upstream measures, because we can't police our way out of a lot of the challenges. I would say mental health and addictions was the thing that was brought up the most in a policing conference, which are not necessarily purviews as we saw at the risk table of things that they're going to be able to mitigate or prevent or solve. So that's it, I think. It was a great, short, really jam-packed time.
Councilor Chase?
No update at this time.
Okay, just a couple quick things. So just to let everybody know, I guess one of the committees is the NOAA board that I'm on now. So I'll be traveling to Thunder Bay on Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday's the meeting, and then coming right back. But it'll be interesting because one of the things that I'm going to bring up is policing that, because whether the minister says whatever the minister says, I don't care. Like, we advocate on behalf of this municipality, not what he tells us to do. And we have to keep hammering away, and we are going to begin to build coalitions again of much greater than we had before, because obviously someone's not listening, like fixing the problem or sort of fixing it on the monetary side, not on all the other issues. For 1 year is fine for 1 year, but it's not good enough for 2024 going forward. So there has to be a lot more discussion with regards to that. So I already warned them that will be coming up. It maybe isn't a big deal for some of the other participants at NOMA, but it is for a majority of their members.
Can I add one piece to that, actually, in regards to it, is that one of the things that we identified in that is that the cost of policing in the Northwest region has been increasing everywhere too. So
yes.
it is a trending, yeah.
Yeah, and I did attend FCM, which is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in Toronto. But I'll wait till the council meeting to update, because I know we're going to have to suspend this meeting to get ready for our planning meeting, but I'll provide some context and some details at the council meeting when we have a round table, okay? Thank you. So do we want to, or do we want to do one more item? Or?
That's probably good.
Okay. So we're going to suspend this meeting to get ready for the planning meeting for noon, and then come back into the meeting and start in earnest. Because we really haven't. We have one item done on the agenda. Let's call this public statutory meeting under the Planning Act to order. I'd like to start with land acknowledgement. Councillor Koch, please, so everybody can stand.
As we gather, we recognize that we are on treaty-free land which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with Indigenous people. We give thanks for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. We seek wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Let these principles guide us in our decision-making.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, council declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. On today's agenda from a previous meeting, from a meeting at which a member was not in attendance, seeing none. Item number 1, applications being considered this afternoon. Zoning bylaw amendment D14-23-04, civic address lot 6, Lougheed Drive. We'll move on to applicant presentations, and I believe we have do we have someone? Oh yeah. You said Amy?
Yeah.
Okay, Amy, you ready to? You're first up to speak.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the council this afternoon and the time that you've taken out of your day to hear our proposal. So as mentioned, we are applying for a rezone to allow for the temporary use of a camper on our property during the construction of our home. And so our request comes from us being in the process of moving to Kenora. My partner, he is already working in Kenora and has been staying at a temporary accommodation. But we are asking the council to consider our application to allow us to dwell on our property while the construction of our home is taking place this summer and into the fall and probably spring of next year. And so I have been meeting regularly with the city planner and the associate planner to ensure that our use request is compliant with all zoning requirements and bylaws. We've chosen a location on our property to move the camper to ensure that it is tastefully situated in the residential zone section of our property along the Winnipeg River, but that it is least visible from the river as possible, that it will be hooked up in our septic field, which is almost finished actually being completed this week, and that we would be able to dwell on that property again for the months coming during our home build, which has, since our application has come in, begun. So we've had our water installed via our private well. As I mentioned, our septic field is nearly complete, should be completed this week. And we have our hydro coming in probably in the next week or two. And then the pad for our structure will begin. So we are well on our way to actually building our home in Kenora, and would just like to be able to be there to oversee construction and then to allow us to have a place to stay while we are working in the city.
Is that everything then? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, city planner report, rationale. Kevin?
Yes, certainly. As we already noted, this is an application for temporary use for the use of the subject property, which is Lot 6 on Lockheed Drive, as a campground for a recreational vehicle for up to 2 years in the RR, or Rural Residential Zone. The use of property in the RR zone as a campground is not normally permitted, but Section 39 of the Planning Act does give councils the right through a temporary use bylaw to authorize the temporary use of land, buildings, or structures for any purpose that is otherwise prohibited. The subject property was created as part of a 9-lot subdivision in 2014. Since that time, the City of Kenora hasn't received any permits or related applications for development of the property. As a result of a bylaw enforcement complaint, the city became aware of this property and adjoining properties were in use as campgrounds. This was last fall, and this is, as I've already noted, isn't permitted use. The property owners were contacted with a request to bring the properties into compliance. Property owners wishing to legally establish the temporary use of their property as a campground while constructing a permanent dwelling were informed that the city was willing to accept applications for a temporary use bylaw for a single temporary use campsite, with the expectation that any such applications would meet a set of criteria, and these criteria had been established following our experience with other properties in the city. So the criteria would be that, in this case, the permanent building will be located on land zoned as rural residential, that the applicants must have applied for and obtained a permit for construction of a permanent dwelling on the same property, and that applicants must submit an approved permit for a septic system from the Northwestern Health Unit for that campground use, so that the camper use would be connected to an approved septic system. A subdivision agreement is in place on this property stipulating there is to be no disturbance of aquatic vegetation and requiring that agreements of purchase and sale include notification of purchasers, that the city requires building construction and septic field placement in areas zoned rural residential, and we'll get to that again in a few minutes, and having a height above 320.6 meters above sea level. The elevation corresponds with the boundary you'll see in the zoning map between the RR and HL zones. And I have included a topographic map here showing the elevations on the property. We don't have a contour line at exactly 320.6 meters, but you can see where 320 and 321 are located on the property. Turning to legislative policy and city directives. First of all, the Provincial Policy Statement 2020, which states that development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be sustained by rural service levels should be promoted. Then with the City of Kenora Official Plan 2015, the land use designation of the property is rural area. Policy 4.1 of the plan states that permitted uses in the rural area include a variety of agricultural, residential, industrial, commercial, recreational, tourism, and open space uses. The official plan guides us in implementing the zoning bylaw and allows that council may pass a bylaw to allow for the temporary use of lands. Provided that, and it sets out 5 conditions. First, that the temporary use does not require major capital investment or alteration to the existing landscape. B, the proposed use is compatible with surrounding land uses. C, the proposed use does not require extension of municipal services. Fourth, D, that the developer has entered into agreement with the municipality specifying the conditions under which the use may be permitted. And E, that the bylaw shall specify a maximum time period. And then turning to the zoning bylaw, the western portion of the property, so if you refer to figure 6, you can see the western portion of the property highlighted in yellow. And that is located, is currently zoned rural residential, or RR. And this zone allows for the development of low-density, single-detached, seasonal, or permanent housing and compatible uses. The eastern portion, and it's a bit difficult to see in the map here, but there's a light blue hatching over it, is that portion of the property that's located below that flood level of 320.6 meters. And the HL zone is identified, the HL zone identifies lands which are susceptible to flooding or erosion or any other physical characteristic that would otherwise cause harm to persons or lead to any other physical deterioration of buildings and structures. Only very limited development may be permitted in the HL zone, including wildlife conservation reserves, docks, farms, parks, and parking. The unpermitted campground use documented by bylaw enforcement last fall was located in the HL zone. Under the zoning bylaw, campers, tents, and recreational vehicles are only permitted to be occupied in a campsite on a campground. A campground use is only permitted in the TR or tourist recreational zone. No other zoning use category permits the occupation of campers, tents, and recreational vehicles even temporarily. Trailers may be parked or stored on a lot in any zone with any existing permitted use, but may not be occupied during storage. Therefore, the temporary use bylaw must be approved that the applicants wish to have a camper located on the property during construction of the primary dwelling. When we sent this for interdepartmental and agency circulation, we only received 2 comments. First from bylaw enforcement and the city clerk, noting that there was 2 campers parked on the property during the September 2022 site inspection, which showed signs that they were occupied at the time. Bylaw enforcement and development service, they note that bylaw enforcement and development services receive many reports each summer season to investigate and enforce similar situations in which vacant properties, mainly lakefront, have been acquired and campers placed to be used as seasonal cottages or cabins with no signs of building activity. If a temporary use provision is permitted in this case, we could expect many more applications from property owners for the same permissions for a 3-year duration and beyond. If a temporary use provision is granted, it is suggested it be limited to a 2-year construction period. It would require that all temporary use provisions issued are monitored and tracked. These timelines would be much shorter than 3 years, and in this particular case, they have already had 1 year or more. And the engineering department recommended stipulating that the total number of recreational vehicles for the purposes of a dwelling be limited to 1 for the duration of the approval. Turning to public comments and notice. Notice was given in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. The Planning Advisory Committee considered the application and a resolution passed a recommendation recommending approval of the application at their meeting on May 16th, 2023. The minutes and relevant resolution were included with the package. As of the date of the report and since the writing of the report, no comments have been received from the public. So finally, turning to my evaluation, in October 2022, the subject property was in use as a campground with associated clearing and preparation of campsites and a road through the floodplain to the adjacent property. The planning department identified a temporary use bylaw as a compromise solution that will permit the short-term continued use of a property as a campground under very specific circumstances, including the issuance of a building permit for the residents and a septic system approval from Northwestern Health Unit. It is being recommended that the camper be required to connect to the septic system for the duration of its use, and that the campground be restricted to the portion of the property that is zoned RR, or rural residential, above the flood level of the Winnipeg River. It is my opinion that the proposal meets the criteria for a temporary use as set out in the policies in Section 8.3.2 of the official plan. It requires no capital investment by the City of Kenora and will not result in significant alteration to the existing landscape. It appears to be compatible with the neighboring uses, and we expect that other temporary uses will be forthcoming from the neighboring properties who are taking, as they take advantage of the opportunity to resolve the enforcement concerns that were identified last fall in a similar fashion. No further agreement is required beyond the conditions stipulated in the recommended bylaw, and the maximum recommended time period of 2 years should be sufficient time to enable construction of a permitted dwelling on the property. And I would like to note also that, as noted, there are other properties that were identified last fall in proximity to this one, and I would like to commend the applicant for being the first to come forward, despite actually being one of the, I think, the newest resident to the area. We continue to work with other property owners out there to find a resolution, so we certainly appreciate Ms. DeYager's cooperation with the planning department in finding a resolution to the situation. With that, my recommendation is that the application for temporary use bylaw, file number D14-23-04, to permit the temporary use of the property legally described as PIN 42152-0467 for a campground for a single recreational vehicle connected to an approved septic system for a period of up to 2 years in the RR rural residential zone should be approved, and that council give 3 readings to the bylaw to that effect.
Thank you. Moving on the agenda, item number 3, public comment. Is there anybody like in? No?
Nobody present.
Okay, so no one's present. So moving on to item 4, questions of council. So is there any questions of any councillors? Councillor Pangone?
This is maybe not specific to this application, and I also want to say thank you to Ms. Dieger for working proactively with the planning department to come to a solution, but I think sort of just going to the comments expressed by bylaw in this seems to be is this entire subdivision being utilized in this way? Can you speak to that?
Not the entire subdivision. A number of lots were identified as being in use in this fashion.
And is this something that you see as like a rampant problem throughout our city, or does this just seem to be specific to this area?
I wouldn't call it rampant, but I would say it is probably the most frequent, or one of the top, probably the most frequent planning enforcement complaint that we have to identify on an annual basis. Fortunately, in the vast majority of cases, once we bring our concerns to the attention of the landowners, we achieve always our first step is to achieve voluntary compliance. We realize that some people aren't aware of the bylaws, so we will inform them of the infraction and request their cooperation in achieving compliance. And as I noted, in the vast majority of cases, we do achieve that compliance. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but we try. So it is a frequent.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jason and Councillor Winfrey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this question is not directly relating to this application, but more or less related to this type of enforcement issue. Has your department considered a permit process to proactively charge individuals like this applicant a fee to do this, so that they don't have to go through this process? So that if somebody buys a vacant lot on Buck Sturgeon or the river or wherever, rural zoned waterfront, where they could proactively get permission through a permit process. Is that something that you've discussed internally?
Yeah, that is something that has been discussed. Personally, I'm wanting to take a look at that as we go into drafting a new zoning bylaw in the upcoming months. One of the challenges we faced is there seems to be a word of mouth that in the community where people are informing new arrivals to the community, or people purchasing properties in the community, that they can do this. That's not coming from the city itself, but there seems to be coffee shop talk where people think that this is legally permitted. So quite often we find that they are acting in good faith and just not understanding what rules are in place. So trying to find a way to facilitate these short-term uses is something that we may want to look at in the new zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Councillor Winfrey.
I just wanted to commend Ms. Dieger for coming forward and asking for permission instead of forgiveness. We really appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you, is 2 years enough time for you? You're going to be done before?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, as long as everything goes to schedule, it should be completed next summer. So we have, we have a bit of time, but things seem to be moving in that direction. So I feel as though 2 years is substantial for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Nansen.
Can you extend that if the build is not complete?
Yes, so the maximum length of time that we can approve a temporary use bylaw for is 3 years, but you can reapply following the expiration of temporary use bylaw. So in this case, if 2 years wasn't sufficient, they could come back and reapply for a temporary use. Or if we update our zoning bylaw regulations within that 2 years, it would be addressed under whatever regulations we have in effect at that time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you.
No.
Okay. So moving on, item number 5, close of the public meeting. Meeting is to be declared closed following any comments and questions, so it's adjourned. Okay.
Okay, it's reinstated.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the public portion of the committee of the whole meeting, but we are going to move down to item number 4 under recreation and culture. 4.1 Muse policy additions. Braden. Welcome, Braden.
Thank you. Could we congratulate Braden on his very happy to have him taking up the mantle as our new Muse director. Congrats, Braden.
Thank you. Okay, well, I don't have a presentation as such. The policy updates have been distributed prior to the meeting. The biggest thing is that it's not appropriate to be running an organization based on tradition, and so a lot of the things that we've been doing for many years are now included in these policies. Conservation, interpretation, education, all things we've been doing for many years. These are, they represent a sharpening of previous policies, so they're not based on sort of, they're not completely new. They are based on what our former policies were. So, I am here if anyone needs to have any clarification or if they need any questions answered, I can certainly do that.
And just for a little more context, so these are policies that have been reviewed with administration and then advanced to the board level and have been approved at the board level.
Indeed, yes, that's right.
No question, Councilor Van Gogh?
No, they're great.
It does.
What comments I can say they're great.
Sure, it represents a ton of hard work, and I'm really, I'm feeling really good about it. So I think we have a pretty good team at the Muse. So.
And no questions?
Maybe Braden should come and do more presentations.
Yes.
Airtight, yeah.
That's probably about as concise as I've seen you.
Yeah, sure. Nailed it. Yeah, okay. Well, if there are no questions, certainly if there are any follow-up questions, I can be reached at bmurray@themusekenora.ca or just stopping by the museum. We'd love to see you. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Braden.
Thanks, Braden. Sorry to keep you here for like 3.5 hours. 5-minute presentation.
I owe you on that one, Braden. I'll find out a repayment.
Yeah. And keep him to his word.
I'll make him whole.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Did think of one thing.
Too late.
On the policies around the reserves, there was no mention of the building reserve. Is that a separate policy or different or not included or?
Yeah, so that what Lisa's talking about is there is a are you talking about the Art Center Reserve?
The one for the heritage building portion of it.
Oh, the heritage building portion. Yes. So for those who are unaware, the heritage building portion of the reserve is specifically monies that were set aside for the upkeep of the heritage portion of the annex building, which is now the office of the Art Center. That is a great question. That's not one that I have an answer for.
Okay.
So I can find you that, and I can let you know.
Yeah, I didn't see it listed, and I was still curious. I just don't want it rolled into everything else.
No.
So the city and Stace, maybe just or Andrew.
Do you
want to explain the difference between the reserves that the city sort of holds for those types of things versus the operating reserves that we?
Yeah, so I think overall there's about 4 different reserves that the Muse has. Anything related to the annex would have been like quite old, where probably donors would have made donations and they would have set it up for specific uses related to the capital side of the business. Of the three of the 4 reserves are for kind of like capital only. One of the reserves does have an operating element in it, but it was a very small portion of a reserve. I think there was about $60,000 sitting there. So that's all I've got. And
Right, so further to that, the reserves are mainly, that we hold are for the buildings. So they're in relation to the building, so we maintain the building. So if it's any type of reserve related to building, that's where that sits. And same with what Stace was mentioning on the Heritage Building, that's from donations.
And historically, councils through the budget process would have allocated $37,500 per year per building to the reserves, so that there was adequate money sitting there as a pool, so that when projects came up, we could actually draw on those.
Yeah, and specifically the fund that Lisa was talking about, there was a separate fund because the annex building was designated as a heritage building. It needs things like a slate roof, for example, which you have a roof and it costs X amount of dollars. A slate roof costs X amount of dollars plus half again. So there are certain kind of the difference in keeping up those heritage elements, and that's what it's specifically for.
So those are consolidated into the city's financials, not the Muse?
Yes.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Absolutely, because we maintain the buildings versus the museum.
It used to be separate, so I just,
Yeah, it used to be separate.
thank you.
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thanks again.
Okay, great.
You better hurry up and leave.
Get out that way, yeah.
Because Councillor Moncrief will have another question.
I do, that's what happens to me. I
Yeah.
let things sit with me and then they come to
I love it. Anytime.
I know where to find you.
Doors open.
Thanks, Brady.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go back up to under corporate services 1.2 2023 financial status and forecast report. Brian, did you want to?
Yes, thank you for that. So we have here is the financial status and forecast report as of March 31st, 2023. So the recommendation is that council accepts this financial forecast report as information. So some history or some background on what the financial forecast report is and what we're trying to do with it. The financial forecast reporting is a process in which we use to monitor the budget. We're comparing budgets to actuals, and we also are including a forecast to the year end. So budget monitoring ensures that the operating and capital plans developed in the budget process are being implemented. It also allows for proactive planning and solutions for areas that have financial pressures. So it's an exercise that the city does on a quarterly basis to get a sense of where we stand in our financial status and have some forecasts developed by the departments on where we expect to end up. So the departments have allocated their revenue and expenses on a monthly basis, and they established that by current in-year knowledge, coupled with their historical spending patterns. So that's how they've arrived at their forecasted amounts. This forecast is an estimate at a point in time and relies on current assumptions. As actual experience is accumulated throughout the year, it improves the financial position that can be established. So as of March 31st, the anticipated forecast for a surplus of $757,000 in the net tax levy supported departments, there is $757,000. The self-supported utilities, water, wastewater, and solid waste forecast surplus deficit is a deficit of $87,000 for the water and wastewater, and $330,000 surplus in solid waste. So the details surrounding those surpluses and deficits are found on Appendix 1 for each of the areas. So further to those values, we have explanations that go along with it to explain why we're seeing a surplus or deficit in each of these functional areas. So a conservative approach was taken in the forecasting of the expense and revenues to budget. So large known variances were identified and explained below here. on the Appendix 1. I'm on the second page of Appendix 1. So I'm going to run through some of the main drivers of the surplus that we have in the net tax levy and then the utilities below. So in general government, we have a favorable variance due to lower salary and benefits expense from vacant positions of $252,000. Transportation, we have a favorable variance primarily due to lower salary and benefits due to vacant positions. And
Okay, do you want to let him finish though? Or?
Okay, well, it's just around the wording of the, can you explain, is favorable is that the word that is used in best practice when it comes to speaking about variances?
I don't know if there's a best practice per se, but this is a common language in municipal like reporting.
Okay. I just had never seen it sort of spoken about that way, so it was just a question. Thank you.
That's okay, as long as everybody understands what favorable and unfavorable is. I think, favorable is like a good, like that's a savings, and unfavorable is obviously not good.
It might be unfavorable.
So further to that, where I was at my point, transportation's variance is lower salary and benefits. It's also offset by high winter control costs. We're finding salt and sand prices to be high, as well as we have some unique or one-off fleet costs due to unplanned major repairs that occurred for $189,000. We have recycling surplus primarily due to the contract with circular materials. If you recall, it was $285,000 there. Rec and culture variance, a shortfall in the parking revenue, and we're also seeing an increase in the facility cleaning costs of negative $46,000 deficit there. Planning and development variance, lower salary and benefits due to vacancies, $74,000. So that are the main factors that's driving that forecast in that tax levy support departments. In utilities, water and wastewater variance is we have some increased chemical costs, and we're seeing increased haulage of biosolids from the sewage treatment plant, slightly offset by some lower salary benefits with some vacant positions there. Solid waste, we have a very favorable variance due to an atypical amount of waste received in the first quarter, as of increased tipping fee revenue there.
Sorry, go ahead, Councilor Crunch.
I just wondered if you wouldn't mind, kind of for the public, speaking to what a surplus in the next net tax levy, what happens with that at the end of the year?
Typically, I think in the past, those surpluses may have been taken into, say, a contingency reserve, earmarked for future projects. Essentially, it's determined by council where we utilize those surpluses.
Just a little more follow-up on that, Councillor Koch. Typically, when we would finalize the surplus or deficit through the year-end process would be after our budget process, so that there's sort of a bit of a timing issue around that. Like, we don't know what the final number would be until usually after our operating capital budgets have been passed. So just wanted to give you some context around that. So we don't always know that number in advance of a budget cycle.
Yeah. This is just a preliminary variance or surplus that we've established. Anything could happen in year, leading up to the end of the year, that could drastically change this. But this is our best estimate at this point in time.
So Ryan, the question I had was under water and wastewater. So that's just the piece applicable to expenses, right? Correct? Like salaries, like what's that number made up of? That's exclusive of like
net
remaining operating capital money?
So it's made up of the net cost. So we're assuming, the assumption is that all the capital that was identified in the water and wastewater will be complete and spent this year. We don't have any estimate that the projects will be over or under. We're estimating that it'll all be fully spent.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? No? Thanks, Ryan.
So that's appendix 1, sorry, just looked
Oh,
at.
sorry.
Appendix 2, so if we continue on, I'll be quick. The appendix 2 contains the capital projects and gives us a brief update on current spending to budget and some schedule status of the capital budgets that we have today, or projects. And that's all.
And everything's on schedule.
No, not quite. I was just going to say, Craig, could you provide a high-level overview? I'm sorry, I'll give you 5 seconds here. I'm just going to stall for a couple minutes, give you a chance to. There looks like there's 3 or 4 kind of major projects. We know ice pad that are paused or delayed. Could you just, those main ones?
Yeah, so I just run through the list. I think Mr. Mayor, you're aware, the Pearson Street parking lot next to Norman Park. I think we've put that temporarily on pause for future discussion. The work at the Moncrief Construction Sports Center, the ice pad work there, that is following the geotechnical analysis beneath the existing slab and design work that will be carried out this fall. That construction will take place in 2024. Our facilities manager is working through the arena lighting scope. Sorry, I don't have a better update than that on that one item. And paint maintenance on the standpipes. Bill Mundy and I are in active discussions on some structural steel work that may be required prior to completing the painting. We don't want to go and do painting and then have to take it off again to do the repairs. So we're just going to get through that analysis first before we commit to the painting. I think that covers all the positive.
Yeah, so on the whole, pretty good. Just a couple minor issues. We wanted to make sure, like, that's not something we've typically shared with council in the past, so we thought that would be valuable information.
Love it.
Yeah. This is great information.
Thanks,
like
love
the
it.
variance report, like that is.
And maybe, Greg, if we could just put a high-level email together just to support council with any talking points around those projects that may be delivered.
Yeah, that's no problem.
I'm sure everybody is just waiting with bated breath on the standpipes.
Where's our drinking water?
Is that, Ryan, is that everything?
That's all, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Moving on to 1.3, customer service standards policy. Heather, I'm assuming
Yes, so our Kelly is not here, and she would probably elaborate a lot more on this policy. This policy has been circulated through the senior management leadership team. There has been feedback from all areas. You'll see that the policy that was attached is actually a redraft, so instead of track changes, there was just a lot of changes on the policy. So we've just presented it brand new. It does contain components of the former policy as well as reflective of our new process. So trying to incorporate the expectations of staff of how the new customer response will be provided and timelines around that, and then how customers can expect service from the city. So that is a high-level summary of what the policy reflects, and open to any kind of feedback or suggestions or changes to the policy as presented. And then I'll just add from the presentation, after council provides direction to administration on, yes, this is how we see our customer service rolling, moving forward, then we will be meeting with all staff and starting with our seeds team. And then, of course, those managers and supervisors rolling it out to their own areas, working with staff on the policy and outlining expectations. So that would be the next step.
Any question? I think we probably asked all the questions.
Yeah, I think we did.
Earlier in your presentation.
Okay.
So, thank you.
But I will take away those comments that council shared during the presentation, take that back to the team and for feedback, and also when we deliver it to the staff, we'll make sure everyone hears that that was feedback from council.
Okay. Moving on to 4.1, corporate complaints policy.
Okay, so this policy is new. We currently do not have a formalized customer complaint policy, so this is new, and it is reflective of what other municipalities, the policies that they have in place to handle these types of complaints. So it formalizes the process and then also again outlines the expectations of the roles and responsibilities under the policy for staff.
Councillor Conch.
I have a few things.
Sure.
Okay.
Ready.
The first one is I just wondered about the application, so where it says it does not apply to issues addressed by legislation, etc. I just wondered how concerns with those are addressed, if there are documents and things that we can change when we have new information. Is there a mechanism by which we would incorporate changes that are complaint-based if they are have merit?
I mean, I think every complaint that comes in is obviously, it's driven by something, right? So we will be prepared to obviously process the complaint and respond. Every complaint will receive a response. So they're handled a little, I shouldn't say differently than a service request, but formalized complaints, depending on what it's about, will have a response provided. So if it is driven by legislation, then there might be work for us to do on the back end. Maybe something that is legislated that hasn't, either we haven't incorporated into our policies or procedures, and we need to look at that. So we can look at the wording of this for sure.
Okay. And then under investigation, does it really need to say council does not have jurisdiction over staff, etc.? I feel like that's covered in so many other places, and just I don't feel like it needs to be part of this necessarily, just my opinion. And then I wondered if there was a process for like a summary of complaints just as information to council, just so we're kind of aware of this stuff that we should be looking to hear, or I don't know, just and then really, I'm sorry, really kind of nitpicky on the form. There's just some like wonky sentences on names of staff person involved if no, instead of if known, and then in the form response letter it says dear Mr. Mrs. There's no opportunity for that person to indicate their gender necessarily, and so I wondered if that was even something, if we could just use their full name instead of assigning a title in that way.
Sure.
And then the last thing was where it says, have you contacted anyone else from the city of Kenora regarding this complaint? I just thought there was an opportunity to put, if so, who? Otherwise you might just get yes.
Okay. You can definitely incorporate that.
That's all. I'm sorry to be fussed.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything else?
Councillor Michael.
Just, does it go far enough in protecting staff if there's a in-person complaint or
about a staff person directly?
Or just the manner that they're delivering the complaint, or is there some sort of,
yeah, Roberta will.
So, again, this does not take the place of internal review or investigation or conversation at the very minimum with employees. This is really a mechanism for citizens or those to raise a concern that they feel may not be appropriate to raise through, like it's different than a customer complaint or a customer service request. So with any concern that is raised or feedback that is provided about a staff person, Human Resources works together with the senior leader to review, to understand, to allow for response. We understand that there's sometimes differences of opinion or maybe there's lack of information, and that is managed through the performance management process, not through this complaint. So no citizen would actually have access to, or no complainant would have access to the outcome of a situation because it is a human resource or personnel related matter. It would be moved into that realm. Does that answer the question?
It does, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, thanks so. Moving on to 1.5 parking lots and structures.
You're up to the podium.
This is
not a presentation. I'm speaking to my report. So this report is to amend the parking lots and structures bylaw to accommodate the capital improvements at the Moncrief Construction Sports Center this summer. So as communicated in the media release, there will be 30 spaces daily for vehicle and trailer parking at the boat launch. And in order to alleviate the closures and the additional parking impacts in the city, we've also looked at using parking lots 2, 3, and 4 at the front of the rec center to accommodate some of the daily parking for the boat launch, including single vehicles and vehicles with trailers only. So the parking lot bylaw amendment is just to amend lots 2, 3, and 4 to be able to charge the $5 daily fee for those lots, as currently lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 are free 4-hour parking. So the idea is, as outlined in the report and the media release, that there will be a parking attendant available at peak times at the parking kiosk in the boat launch parking lot to help people purchase parking and direct them to the lots that they're to go to for the day. So that's the one parking lot, so that's the front of the rec center, so lots 2, 3, and 4. And then in addition to that, we recognize that with the closure of lot 6 for the entire project, there would be no long-term parking available at the rec center. So for long-term parking, we've taken a lot that is off McCann Way. It was originally adopted into the parking lot bylaw in 2021 as an overflow parking lot for day parking for the additional park boat launch. And we've noted over the last couple of years that it's pretty empty most of the time, so that was really an ideal location to allow long-term parking for this summer season. So currently it is daytime parking only, no overnight parking in that lot. So this amendment just allows overnight parking, and it's free overnight parking, and that's just for the summer season. So 2 parking lot bylaw amendments just to accommodate the pressures on parking during this project.
Councillor Moncrief.
I'm sorry, can you tell me what year that parking lot was developed off McCann Way?
2021.
2020, thank you.
Any other questions? So is that DK parking? What?
Oh my gosh, I just have a comment.
Okay.
I want to thank the staff for how hard they've been working to mitigate the shutdowns and the closures and redirections and accommodating people that have these big rigs that they're towing around and need a place to put them. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, I do want to echo Councillor Moncrief's point around the staff, but I also want to say thank you to the contractor, because they've also gone above and beyond to make sure they understand the importance of the project to the community and the importance of keeping those services running during the project. So they've been very collaborative in working with us to make sure that we can deliver this project in the least intrusive ways.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks, Evan. 1.6, received communication audit report.
So this is just the recommendation to receive the communication audit report that was presented by the Hub Sutherland at the special committee of the whole meeting held last week. It is an opportunity for council to discuss the report any further, other than just receiving the report. So Councillor Manson wasn't at that special meeting. If there was anything else you wanted to bring forward since the special meeting was held, or any other member wants to discuss anything, this would be the opportunity for that. And then the resolution would just be to receive the report after the presentation.
Yeah, Councillor.
Well, yeah, and it's probably things that have all been talked about, but this is I really enjoyed reading through this report. I actually think it gives us a lot of action items, lots of positives that are being done, and then lots of room for opportunity and growth. And I think that I believe that Councillor Moncrief probably already pointed this out last time, but I do think it just bears repeating around the media piece and our relationship with the media and the sort of clickbaity nature of our media. Some of our media partners has not always served us from a communication standpoint, so I look forward to some of the work that we can do to make sure that we are communicating effectively through all the channels that we have available. This was a really great report, and I think this is something that people have been talking about ad nauseum, is communication.
Councilor Byrne?
Just wondering, this may have been shared, but the cost of the report? Just
That was, I think that was 30, if I remember right. Yeah, that was last year, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, that would be that year.
So that'll come forth as a recommendation to receive it at next week, next week's council meeting. So thank you. Moving on the agenda, item number 2, fire and nothing, engineering infrastructure, nothing, recreation culture we've dealt with, planning and building services. So we have 5.1 budget amendment, 9th Street North Development Road Access.
That'll be me. Thank you. Council, the report before you is related to a budget amendment in the amount of $120,000 plus HST to reorient the road going into the old Haas 30-unit build that was supposed to be coming off of 9th Street, and instead it will now be coming off of Brinkman. And by way of background, this project actually started prior to 2019 when the city would have sold that land to the Kenora District Services Board at the time. Then in 2019, March, the city undertook a project to install civil infrastructure there to service the building. And then in addition to that, there was another $110,000 that was spent towards reorienting the Evergreen Community Club to allow for a future road going in there. And that would not only be to service the old Haas building itself, but also to, if Lot 15 in the Chartier subdivision was ever to have residents on there as planned, that would be the route that would be used. There's some background there. I do really want to recognize the meetings that I would have had with the general contractor, Jarnell Contracting, OHAS themselves, and also the engineers, all in an effort to try to get this price as low as what we could. So the request is a budget amendment for $120,000. It will be funded through the Future Land Development Reserve. And, as it relates to risk, by coming off of that very gentle incline off of Brinkman Road, it's really going to reduce the risk associated with egress to this building.
So I had a quick question. And I'm happy the change is occurring in that, because I think there was maybe some issues or concerns to begin with going on to 9th, and I think that was brought up. So is some of that money used to kind of landscape that where the entrance would have been off of 9th? Or are they just shifting monies around I kind of want to know if we're paying for more than just the road access.
Very good question. So what we did was we took the monies that would have been allocated to put the road in off of 9th and shifted that. So this extra $120,000 is the roads a little bit further. There was the requirement to add a turn area for the fire truck to come in there adequately to do a 3-point turn. In the initial version that they would have provided us drawings with, they actually were trying to add 6 additional spots. So I went, hey, we're not looking for anything incremental here. We're just looking to change the access road. So that we started at about $160,000. That's what brought down some of the prices and that sort of thing. So this is they'll obviously clean up off of 9th. Yeah. There's a retaining wall that needs to go in there because now there's a parking lot that's going to be there, and there's going to be a lot of pressure coming down that hill. And then they will go with a 6-meter wide road to go to Brinkman.
Okay.
Just further, does that cover the drainage? There was a drainage question about it draining down on tonight. Is the retaining wall and all of that?
Well, it'll be soft-scaped instead of hard-scaped.
That's what I'm saying. Will that cover that? I'm asking that.
Well, that's the question I asked was, like, were we paying for some of that, like of the landscaping or whatever?
Does it take care of the problem?
So let's focus on the mechanism. So are they going to be putting forward a renewed site plan to
Yes.
reflect?
That's
Yes, they
the
are,
question.
right? So
That
they're
is
going to
the
put forward a renewed site plan. That will include how they're going to manage, closing off that current, temporary access they have on the 9th Street and how they're going to finish off that site.
Yeah, there will be amendment to the site plan, yes.
That's what I should have asked.
So,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. So administration will take that into consideration, Councillor Moncrief, and we'll make sure that softscaping, as the mayor's alluded to, we'll make sure the drainage is accounted for on that side of the property.
Thanks.
I should say in working with OHAS, who've been great to work with through this process, because they're at this point that they are in this project, I did, request some financial support from them, which they were not able to commit to at this point in time. So as the project gets to completion, the hope is that there'll be some money coming back to the city to support.
Up from or off the 120.
Yeah. So this is a worst case scenario.
Perfect. Any other questions of Stacy? Thanks, Stacy. And I guess you're up again for 5.2.
Yes.
Development contribution bylaw.
Thank you. So the report for you, Council, is related to the development contribution bylaw that we would have spoken about last month, and that the goal here is to have Council approve the new development contribution bylaw. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of our solicitor through this process. Of course, there is a lot of legalese that goes with the municipal acts in section 106 and 107, and so really worked with them to make sure that whatever we were creating from a bylaw standpoint lined up very well with the municipal act. Yeah, it lays out what we're supposed to do. We've spoken about this before. Once this is passed, now we will have a process by which we can have private sector support financially for projects that are not housing projects that are covered under the capital facilities bylaw for affordable homes. And number two would be for the CIP that has a very specific use, a very specific budget. This is to deal with just private sector development. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm not trying to be nitpicky here, but it says project costs should be clearly defined in a submitted application. Financial support may be provided for project costs, including but not limited to. So that kind of raises a flag for me, and it kind of scares me because it's not limited to, but then it says capital costs, and there's two items, non-capital costs, there's two items. Are those just examples?
They're just examples. Council has complete discretion to make the decision on which projects they want to support and at which level. Now that we have a bylaw, assuming the bylaw goes through, we will have to create application forms and all of these other mechanisms to allow us to deliver this. So, and as we go through this process and we start to see what these applications look like, we're going to get a better feel for, what council decides to support or not. It's not like we could go out to another municipality and get a cookie cutter that's already been created so this is new ground for us, and this is just to give some examples of the types of things. And similarly, if you were to look at an application for other things, even when we're doing funding and that sort of thing, they give you examples of eligible costs. So this is just an example.
Yeah, okay. Your Worship, the intention of the language is, the language around public benefit is quite broad, and we, didn't feel that we could exhaustively define all public benefits. So, and that may change, from council to council, from project to project. So we wanted to provide a broad interpretation of that for each council to consider.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, was the Councilor Moncrief first?
So I guess I'm glad that, excuse me, it comes to council, but it sits with staff, and so I think there's that concerns me a little bit. Is this a budgeted amount annually, and once it's gone, it's gone? Are we missing projects that we may not be aware of because it's been denied at the staff level because we're over? You know what I mean? There's lots of opportunities there to somehow, I don't know what the amount of the money is. I don't know. Are we budgeting for it? Are we?
So first things first, Councillor Moncrief. So I'm going to work in reverse. If we were to receive a request on a development, that would come to council.
Yes.
Okay. As far as the budget part goes, we really need to think about that. And we're going to be kicking off our budget process with council starting next week. We really need to think if that's something that council wants to budget for. We need to figure out how to accommodate that in the budget. We do, through some projects, we've been using the Future Land Development Reserve right now, and you would have seen that just on the last conversation around the OHOS bill. But that is a finite amount of money that as it dwindles will eventually run out. So we do need to figure out how we're going to sustain programs like this going forward if council does see public benefit in these developments and wants to continue to contribute. So that's one of the situations we're going to have to really think about during budget time. And Stace, do you have anything to augment?
I would just add that, when we do the development services update, you're made aware of what the pipeline looks like and all the opportunities. And, typically there's not an ask until such time as the project is evolved to a certain stage. So you would have heard, unless something is coming through very, very quickly, probably 2 or 3 touch points on how a particular file is evolving. So you do have visibility to those things.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Mine was maybe just sort of lobbing on to these points are there any municipalities that have a bylaw or like a policy or procedure around this, or are we sort of charting new territory here in Ontario?
Yeah, I did a lot of research, and I actually had a really good meeting with a representative from Invest Ontario to just understand best practices. I wanted to showcase Kenora, but also to understand what's going on. Hamilton would be the most progressive. They tend to use CIP to do this. First of all, our CIP is for defined areas. There's 3, as you know. We spoke about this before. The other thing is our CIP is funded at a rate of $125,000. So it's, and it tends to be for facade improvements and that sort of thing. So this stands on its own. And, we do have some ideas in terms of how to fund it going forward, but that's all going to be discussions at the budget table, and they'll come forward to council.
Sorry, didn't the previous council up it to 200? Or wasn't there an increase last term of council?
There was.
Or was that just a one-time?
One time.
My mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just on when we're talking about financing pieces, and I did bring this up with the CEO, I think it was last week, and I think Ryan was in the room. Maybe when we look at a project, we look at the return on investment, like what we're going to get back. So there's nothing wrong with advancing a project which is going to provide assessment or whatever revenue for the city over the long term to do short-term financing and pay it back that way. I think we need to keep all the options open, not just throwing a whole bunch. We don't always need to throw a whole bunch of money into a pot or into a fund to fund these. Maybe we can use a combination of a couple of things, including that, if we're allowed to do that. I'm just throwing that out as a general observation.
So again, new, okay, but just in terms of what I envisioned in terms of coming back to council, and also to just rationalize and ask myself, I would be doing a business case study, right? You're going to see what that would look like, because it's either going to be tangible or it's going to be intangible, like employment and that sort of thing. So that it has so to Kyle's point, broader, benefit to the municipality has lots of sort of broad meanings to it. Some of it will actually be financial.
Yeah. Okay. Just as long as we put that piece in the discussion, because there will be a component of almost anything you do that if it's something new, that would create some type of direct revenue for the city. And I'm just suggesting, not that I wish to go out and borrow all kinds of money, but sometimes that might make it work, might make sense to finance it over. Because I've heard other municipalities in other like in other provinces, when I was at FCM, that do that. But they might be talking about multi-million dollar investments in a particular project. So, Councillor Monica.
Has the contribution agreement been designed already, or are you doing it one-off with every development?
No, we're going to create a template. We've got our solicitor working on it.
Can you get to see that we get to see that agreement, just to see what it looks like?
That's typically an administrative matter, but I'd have no problem sharing that with you
Yeah,
for
I'm just
information.
curious about things like, you know, if they sell this, 2 years in and have, you know what I mean? I just wanted to look at things and see.
So council would approve those agreements as they come forward for execution.
Right, and we actually have the agreement partially designed with an assignment provision in there.
Yeah,
It has
that's just an example.
Yeah.
I would like to have a look at it, so if we could see it, that'd be great. I don't want to get involved in approving or any of that, I just want to.
Feedback is welcome.
Yeah,
We can work through that.
Thanks.
No questions? Oh, it's your cookie, lady. Okay, if there's no other questions than that, thanks, Stace. That's looking forward to that.
Just one more, sorry, one more. There's some awkward wording again in the bylaws, so I don't know if you want that pointed out now or privately or. Where is it, section?
We've all got all day, right?
Sorry.
Just joking.
So 6C is particularly strange. There's made up words in there and everything, so.
Made up.
That part needs to be looked at. That's all I'm gonna say, move on.
Is that the main one, Councillor, or do you want to just send an email and then we could take a look at that for next week to make sure that the draft is updated?
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
That'd be perfect. That's good for us.
Any other questions, Councilor Monk?
That's it for me.
Okay, so am I safe to move on to 6.1? And Stace, you're on again.
Yeah, thank you. So council, the report before you, this is an NOHFC application. You'll see with all NOHFC applications, the reports and the resolutions are worded very, very specifically. So this is that council supports an application going into the NOHFC. We will be asking for $30,000 from the NOHFC to support a economic and business attraction project. Council, under the MAT, we had $30,000 already assigned for this work. And that part of the recommendation is that council approves any cost overruns, which is true for all NOHFC applications. Essentially what's happened here is we had applied to FedNor for a very large project. And we had $30,000 earmarked for MAT. We were declined because they had limited funds this year, despite the fact that they liked the project. So we've taken the MAT money and we tried to leverage it to the fullest extent possible. So we're going to be carving out portions of what we would have done for the bigger project to get us going in this space. So there's some of the elements of the two-phase project that is identified there, and I think it lines up really well with our strat plan and our economic development, 5-year economic development and tourism strategy as well.
Any questions? Councilor Monk.
Just quickly, it doesn't say in here if that's a human being or a contractor or what.
We would get a contractor to do that work. No, it's not, you cannot apply under these usually for operating dollars from NOHFC for staff.
So what, a couple of things covered under phase one were researching sectors and existing and potential economic initiatives, and which the business center said that it's doing, and I know Northern Development also does that with community profiling. So if that's something that's already available, is there another way that we can move some of the phase two things into phase one?
No, the intent is not to duplicate effort at all. It's to I don't want to take a scattergun approach to trying to attract new business. We've got a bunch of new housing starts here. That's a good thing. When the people start to come here, then we need to start to attract certain sectors, and I want to be very dialed in terms of who we are trying to attract. So with this information, that will allow us to get very laser focused when I think of healthcare and things like that, and talk of expansion of a hospital. There's going to be all sorts of supporting industry that goes on with that. So I want to dial it really right in to make sure that we have very specific information, so that when we're trying to attract people, we have proper due diligence, so that when they're looking at opportunities, that they're choosing Kenora.
Good answer. So what would be the timeline of this project?
NOHFC, I don't expect that they are going to be meeting through the summer months now in terms of awarding the money. So if we could get approval by September, you know, we could do this in 4 months.
No other questions? Great, thanks, Dave. Moving on the agenda, we've had the public statutory meeting for planning. Next meeting is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023.
I was wondering, could we introduce Janice to everyone? Did we do that yet?
Yeah.
Oh, was
As a
that?
communication.
We did it at this meeting.
Yeah, but maybe for the public too?
Yeah, we did do it. It's okay.
Sorry.
So this is Janice Picalo. She's our new director of planning and building services, and she is returned to Kenora. She grew up here and moved away to start her career and is now back, and we're thrilled to have her here in Kenora. Yeah, so she'll be overseeing the planning and building departments.
Okay.
I can think of something else if you need me to.
Well, can you wait till next week?
Yeah, I can.
Before we adjourn? Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Your Worship. So we do just have some exciting news. I know that this is something that the community's been waiting for some time, so I did want to take the opportunity to formally announce that the city has hired its community safety and well-being coordinator. Eric Shee has accepted the position, and he's going to be starting in July. We're just still working. He has a family to move, and we're just working through the logistics on a precise start date, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about Eric. Eric has an extensive educational background that features stops at Cornell University, Oxford University, and the British Columbia Institute of Technology. His most recent work as a local journalism initiative reporter with Dougal Media in Thunder Bay has afforded him the opportunity to witness firsthand the many challenges faced by municipalities in northwestern Ontario. Previously, Eric served as the Director of Education and Community Development for Elevate NWO, which is a nonprofit social service agency in Thunder Bay which serves vulnerable people affected by HIV/AIDS and hepatitis C. Eric's time with Elevate NWO culminated with his supervision of a harm reduction housing initiative through the maintenance of public housing units for the unhoused and for those experiencing precarious housing. This program was developed to support creating shelter for people living outside in encampments, many with addiction and mental health issues. Collaborating with many community partners and funders, Elevate NWO was able to provide stable transitional housing for over 30 people and to secure permanent housing for 8 of them under Eric's leadership. So we went through a robust recruitment process. Eric, very excited to be here. I won't speak for him, but he is excited to be here and looking forward to meeting everybody. And you know, from our perspective, Eric is very well researched. He has a track record in developing strong relationships with a diverse group of stakeholders. And we think that he brings exceptional strategic communications to this role, which is something that we're really going to need. So, you know, I know since December we've sort of been talking around community safety and well-being, and I know that this is something that people have been waiting for, and I just wanted to share our excitement and enthusiasm to have Eric joining our organization here in July.
Kyle, just one thing to add to that, there's probably more people around the council table here that know Eric than you think, and that because, well, in Thunder Bay at Noma, a couple councillors met him, and for the longest time I would speak to him twice a week. And that very fair, level-headed, you know, very, very personable. So look forward to that. But we have that. We have that connection with him, like in the media circles and that. And I think everybody, when I'm speaking, would probably say the same thing. And that he's very approachable in that. So I think he'll fit well into the position, and look forward to him getting here and getting started. So, great, thanks.
So thanks very much, Your Worship.
Good. Okay, so moving on the agenda, motion to adjourn to the closed meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move resolution number 2, seconded by Councillor Van Bellingham, that pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, authorization is hereby given to committee to move into a closed session at 2:02 p.m. to discuss items pertaining to the following:
Item 1, education and training members of council. So there's 2 matters, mayor and economic development update. Item 2, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, a group of persons, or organization. So there's 2 matters, development request, and the second matter is a request for support from another municipality. And the third item is a personal matters about an identifiable individual, specifically one of the committees, the Crime Prevention Community Wellbeing Committee. There's also a labor relations matter and a disposition.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.